Chapter 1. The Child in the Snow. The scent of pine and approaching snow hung thick in the mountain air as Gwenllian clutched her daughter's hand and ran. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit had faded, hoofbeats swallowed by distance, shouts lost to wind, but fear still hammered in her chest like a second heartbeat. The forest floor pressed cold through her worn boots, each step a prayer that Airlys wouldn't stumble, wouldn't cry out, wouldn't ask again why they were running. "Mama, I'm tired." The 5-year-old's voice trembled, small breath forming clouds in the deepening twilight. "I know, my darling. Just a little farther." Gwenllian's lungs burned. The lie tasted bitter. She had no idea where they were going, only that Lord Cadoc's men would kill them both if they were caught. A healer who refused to let a tyrant's son die deserved execution, he'd declared. That her refusal stemmed from recognizing poison in the boy's blood, poison placed there by the father. Himself mattered not at all. Truth was a luxury the powerless could not afford. Airlys's fingers tightened around hers as the trees began to thin. Ahead, silhouetted against the bruised purple sky, stood the ruins of what had once been a great manor. Crumbling stone towers clawed upward like broken teeth, their shadows stretching long and hungry across fresh-fallen snow. No light burned in the glassless windows. No smoke rose from the collapsed chimneys. Dead places told no tales. "We'll shelter there tonight," Gwenllian whispered, though instinct screamed warnings her exhausted body ignored. Airlys needed warmth, needed rest, needed safety Gwenllian could no longer provide anywhere in the valley below. They crossed the threshold through an archway still grand despite its decay. Inside, moonlight spilled through gaps in the roof, illuminating a great hall where frost painted delicate patterns across marble floors. The air tasted of abandonment and something else, something old and watching. Gwenllian gathered Airlys close, rubbing the child's arms. "Stay near me." "It's pretty," Airlys murmured, violet eyes wide as she gazed at the shattered chandelier that lay scattered like frozen teardrops across the floor. "Like a winter palace." "Yes, darling." Gwenllian's voice caught. Once she'd promised her daughter safety, comfort, a future bright with possibility. Now she offered ruins and running, always running. A sound soft as breath, sharp as breaking ice echoed from the shadows beyond a towering doorway. Gwenllian's hand found the small knife at her belt, inadequate protection against anything larger than a rabbit. She positioned herself between Airlys and the darkness, heart thundering. The shadows moved. He stepped into the moonlight like something conjured from winter itself, tall and impossibly still, dressed in black that seemed to drink the pale light. Dark hair fell past shoulders rigid with what might have been surprise or anger. But it was his face that stole Gwenllian's breath. Beautiful in the way ancient statues were beautiful. All sharp angles and aristocratic lines, utterly inhuman in its perfection. And his eyes? They burned crimson in the darkness, bright as fresh blood against snow. "Daddy, why does that man have red eyes?" Airlys's voice, curious, innocent, impossibly clear in the frozen silence, shattered the moment like dropped glass. The man froze. His expression shifted through emotions too quick to name: shock, disbelief, something that looked terribly like grief. His gaze dropped to Airlys with an intensity that made Gwenllian's protective instincts flare. "Get behind me," Gwenllian commanded, voice low and fierce despite her terror. The knife trembled in her grip. "Whatever you are, you'll not touch my daughter." He didn't move, didn't blink. His focus remained locked on Airlys with an expression Gwenllian couldn't decipher, wonder mixed with devastation, hunger tempered by something almost tender. "Your daughter." The words emerged rough, as though speech itself pained him. His accent carried the weight of centuries, syllables shaped by languages long forgotten. "How old is she?" "That's none of your concern." Gwenllian shifted, angling her body more completely between them. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop further, frost crawling up the walls in response to some invisible command. "This is your domain, then?" "We didn't know. We'll leave at first light. 5 winters." Airlys's cheerful response cut through Gwenllian's desperate bargaining. The child peered around her mother's hip, fear apparently absent from her small frame. "I just had my birthday. Mama made me honey cakes even though we had to leave our house." The man's throat worked, his hands pale, long-fingered, steady as carved marble curled into fists at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge, sharp enough to draw blood. "What is her name?" Gwenllian's mind raced, weighing truth against survival, maternal instinct against the cold calculation that had kept them alive this long. There was something in his tone, not threat exactly, but desperate need wrapped in iron control. Airlies, she answered finally. Her name is Irelies. The sound he made wasn't quite human, a sharp intake of breath that held too much meaning, too much pain. He took one step back, then another. Movements precise despite the tremor running through his frame. Airlies, he repeated, and the name sounded like prayer and profanity together on his tongue. Little star. That's what Mama says. Airlies' delight cut through the tension. Because I was born under starlight. The man closed his eyes. His jaw clenched with such force Gwenllian heard something crack. When he opened them again, the crimson had deepened to something darker, more dangerous. How long have you been running? The question emerged flat, controlled, but beneath it something churned fury perhaps, or recognition. 3 days. Gwenllian's admission felt like surrender. Lord Cadoc's men hunt us. I refuse to participate in murder. So now we're the ones who must die. Cadoc. The name dripped with contempt. That bloated tick still poisons his own blood? Some things never change. The casual mention of Lord Cadoc's nature, his cruelty, his methods sent ice down Gwenllian's spine. Who was this creature, that he spoke of the valley's tyrant with such intimate knowledge? You know him, she said slowly. I knew his grandfather's grandfather. A bitter smile curved lips too perfect to belong to anything mortal. I have known every petty lord who thought himself a king in these mountains. They are all the same. They all bleed the same. His gaze shifted back to Airlies, and something in his expression softened. Children, however, children are different. Airlies, emboldened by his attention, stepped forward despite Gwenllian's restraining hand. Are you magic? Is that why your eyes are red? Airlies, no, I am cursed, he answered before Gwenllian could pull her daughter back. He lowered himself slowly, gracefully, until he knelt on the frost-covered marble, bringing his face level with Airlies's. Up close, the crimson of his eyes seemed to pulse with inner light. I have lived in darkness for more years than your mother's mother's mother drew breath. I have forgotten what sunlight feels like on my skin. That's sad. Airlies's declaration carried the simple conviction of childhood. She reached out one small hand, hovering it near his face without quite touching. Does it hurt? His expression cracked. For just a moment, the ancient mask slipped, revealing something raw and devastatingly human beneath. Yes, little star, it hurts very much. Gwenllian's throat tightened. She should run, should grab Airlies and flee into the night despite exhaustion, despite the hunters who waited in the valley below. This creature, vampire, her mind supplied with terrible certainty, was death, wearing a beautiful face. Yet he knelt before her daughter with tears gathering in immortal eyes. My name, he said quietly, still focused on Airlies, is Emrys. This was my home, before time and blood and foolish choices made it a tomb. He stood in one fluid motion, towering over them both once more. When he met Gwenllian's gaze, his expression had hardened back into that inhuman mask. You are being hunted by mortal men with mortal weapons. They will not enter here. They fear what walks these ruins more than they desire your deaths. Because of you, Gwenllian breathed. Because of what I am. What I have been for 6 centuries. No pride colored the admission, only weary fact. You may shelter here tonight. In the morning, I will ensure your safe passage through the mountains to the northern territories, where Cadoc's reach does not extend. It was more than she'd dared hope for, more than she deserved to ask. Yet something in his voice and the careful way he avoided, looking at Airlies for too long, raised questions that prickled along her healer's instincts. Why? The word escaped before caution could stop it. Why help us? Emrys turned toward the darkened doorway from which he'd emerged, his profile sharp against the moonlight. When he spoke, his voice carried across the centuries like an echo in a crypt. Because she called me Daddy. His shoulders curved inward, just slightly, and for one impossible, heartbreaking moment, I remembered what it felt like to be called home. The admission hung in the frozen air between them, raw, honest, terrible in its loneliness. Airlies tugged at Gwenllian's hand. Can we stay, Mama? I like him. He's sad, but he's nice. Children saw truth that adults learned to ignore. Gwenllian had built her life on that principle, reading the honesty in a patient's eyes, trusting instinct over appearance. Everything she'd been taught about vampires screamed danger, demon, death, but the creature who'd just knelt before her daughter and confessed his pain. He'd called her Little Star, with reverence usually reserved for prayer. We'll stay, Gwenllian said quietly, and watched Emrys' shoulders tense at her acceptance. "Thank you." He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge her gratitude. Instead, he gestured toward a corridor to the left, where flickering light now danced against stone walls, candles igniting themselves at his silent command. "The eastern wing remains intact. You'll find chambers there with furniture still serviceable, and fireplaces that draw properly." His voice had gone cold again, distant, professional. "I will bring food and blankets. Stay in those rooms until dawn." "And you?" Gwenllian asked before she could stop herself. Now he did look back, and the crimson of his eyes seemed to glow brighter in the darkness. "I will ensure nothing mortal or otherwise disturbs your rest." A promise, a vow, a warning to whatever else might haunt these ruins. Gwenllian gathered Irely's close and walked toward the promised sanctuary, feeling his gaze track their every step. Just before they reached the corridor's entrance, her daughter twisted in her arms and waved. "Good night, Mr. Emrys." In the darkness behind them, a sound emerged that might have been a sob or a laugh or both together, a sound that held 6 centuries of longing in its broken syllables. "Good night, little star," the vampire whispered to the empty hall. "Sleep well." And Gwenllian, glancing back one final time, saw him standing utterly still in the moonlight, head bowed, both hands pressed against his chest as though trying to hold together a heart that had stopped beating hundreds of years ago. Whatever haunted this place, she realized, wore its curse on the inside. Chapter 2, Blood and Breakfast. Morning arrived wrapped in silver mist that clung to the manor's broken spires like mourning shrouds. Gwenllian woke to find Irely's already awake, drawing patterns in the frost that had formed on the two, inside of the window during the night. "Look, Mama, it makes flowers when I breathe on it." The chamber they'd been given remained surprisingly intact. A 4-poster bed with velvet curtains faded to pale rose, a wardrobe carved with intricate forest scenes, and a stone fireplace where embers still glowed warm from the fire that had burned through the night. Someone, Emrys, she assumed, had maintained it while they slept. The thought of him moving silently through the darkness, tending their comfort, sent a strange flutter through her chest. Gratitude, she told herself. Nothing more. She'd just finished braiding Irelys's hair when a knock sounded at the door, polite, measured, entirely too human for a creature who needed no mortal courtesies. "Enter," Gwenllian called, drawing her shawl closer against the morning chill. Emrys stepped inside, carrying a wooden tray laden with bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a clay jug that steamed gently. He'd changed from the black garments of last, a night, into a deep burgundy coat that made his pallor even more pronounced. In daylight, or what passed for it through the clouded windows, his beauty became almost painful to look at directly, like staring at a blade's edge. "I cannot offer you fresh provisions," he said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "But these stores remain edible. The tea is made from mountain herbs. It should warm you." Irelys bounded forward before Gwenllian could stop her, peering at the tray with open curiosity. "Don't you eat breakfast?" Something flickered in Emrys's expression, amusement mixed with sorrow. "My needs are different." "Because you're cursed," Irelys said matter-of-factly, reaching for a piece of bread. "Mama says curses can sometimes be broken with the right medicine. She's a healer. She's very clever." Gwenllian's cheeks heated. "Is she?" Emrys's gaze shifted to Gwenllian with new interest, crimson eyes sharp and assessing. "A healer. That explains the plant knowledge I sensed on your clothes. Foxglove, wormwood, silverweed. You can smell that?" Gwenllian asked before she could help herself. "I can smell everything, hear everything. The curse took my mortality but left my senses sharp enough to cut." He moved to the window, careful to remain in shadow where the weak sunlight couldn't reach. 6 centuries of perceiving every heartbeat, every breath, every lie hidden beneath pretty words. It's a particular kind of torment. The rawness in his admission made Gwenllian's healer instincts flare. She recognized suffering when she heard it, regardless of the sufferer's nature. "How were you cursed?" she asked quietly, pouring tea for herself and Irelys. Emrys remained silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. "I was a lord once. These mountains were mine to protect, my people mine to shield. When plague came, the red death that turned blood to poison, I made a bargain with a creature older than stone itself." His fingers traced patterns on the frost-covered glass. "My life for my people's salvation. My mortality for their survival. The price seemed fair." "What happened?" Irelys asked around a mouthful of bread. "The plague lifted. My people lived, and I..." He exhaled slowly, breath forming no mist despite the cold. I became this, endless, empty, unable to save anyone ever again, because the very thing that sustained me required taking the life I'd sworn to protect. Understanding crashed over Gwenllian like winter rain. You feed on blood, when I must. The admission came tight, controlled. I have learned to subsist on animals, on the dregs of life that can be taken without murder. But the hunger never stops, the need never quiets. He turned from the window, and the morning light caught the edge of his profile, beautiful and terrible and unbearably lonely. So I have hidden here, in the ruins of what I once protected, where my presence keeps greater evils at bay, and my curse harms no innocence. Gwenllian's mind raced with questions, medical, practical, impossible. The sunlight, does it truly burn you? Like fire in the veins. Not immediately fatal, but agonizing. A bitter smile curved his lips. I can survive perhaps an hour of direct exposure before the damage becomes irreversible. Moonlight, however. His expression softened fractionally. Moonlight heals, restores. It's the only mercy left in this existence. Erlise had been listening with the intense focus children brought to stories. Now she set down her bread and walked directly to Emrys, looking up at him with violet eyes too knowing for her age. You're lonely, she announced. That's the worst part of your curse. Not the blood or the sunlight. Being alone for a very, very long time. Emrys went absolutely still. His throat worked soundlessly. When he finally managed words, they emerged rough and broken. Yes, little star. That's exactly it. The vulnerability in his voice made Gwenllian's chest ache. She dedicated her life to healing, to understanding the body's mysteries and the heart's wounds. But she'd never encountered suffering quite like this immortal, endless, carved into the very essence of what he'd become. We should go, she said gently, hating the necessity even as she spoke it. You offered us safe passage north. Lord Cadoc's men will be searching. They came during the night. The flat statement stopped her cold. What? Emrys' expression remained neutral, but something dark flickered in his eyes. A dozen riders, armed and angry. They circled the manor's perimeter but dared not cross into the grounds proper. The wards I set centuries ago still hold. They recognize death when it watches them. He glanced at Irelise, then back to Gwenllian. They'll return with more men, more weapons. Eventually, desperation will override fear. Then we're trapped. The realization settled in Gwenllian's stomach like ice. No. Emrys moved toward the door with fluid grace, pausing at the threshold. There are tunnels beneath the manor escape routes built when mortal wars still threatened these mountains. They emerge 3 miles north, beyond Cadoc's territory. I will guide you through them when full dark falls tonight. Relief warred with suspicion in Gwenllian's mind. Why wait until night? If the tunnels are safe, because they're not entirely safe, he interrupted quietly. Other things shelter in the deep places. Things that answer only to strength and blood and immortal authority. His gaze met hers, unflinching. I can protect you in darkness. In daylight, weakened as I am, I become a liability rather than a shield. The honesty of it, the admission of vulnerability from a creature of such obvious power, struck something deep in Gwenllian's chest. He wasn't performing chivalry or demanding gratitude. He was simply stating facts, offering what protection he could within the confines of his curse. Then we'll wait, she agreed. And thank you for your honesty. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or the ghost of what gratitude might have looked like when he'd still been human. You're not afraid of me. It wasn't a question, but Gwenllian answered anyway. I'm terrified. You're the most dangerous thing I've ever encountered. She glanced at Erlise, who'd returned to eating breakfast with a child's easy distraction. But fear and trust aren't opposites. I've learned that much in my work. Sometimes the scalpel that cuts is also the instrument that heals. Emrys stared at her for a long moment, crimson eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. You see too clearly, healer. It's a dangerous gift in this world. So I've discovered. Bitterness colored her tone. Lord Cadoc thought so too. Tell me. The command emerged soft but absolute. What did he do to earn your defiance? Gwenllian hesitated, but something in his stillness, in the way he listened with his entire being, as though her words mattered more than the centuries of silence he'd endured, loosened her tongue. His son fell ill with a wasting sickness. I was summoned to the castle to treat him. When I examined the boy, I found poison in his blood, hemlock and nightshade. administered in careful doses over weeks. She wrapped her arms around herself, remembering the boy's confused eyes. The father's cold calculation. Gothic had been poisoning his own son to force a political marriage. The girl's family refused until the heir seemed near death. Once the betrothal was signed, I was meant to cure him with antidotes already prepared. Emrys's expression darkened into something truly frightening, ancient fury barely leashed. And you refused. I told the boy the truth, gave him purging herbs and helped him escape to his mother's people. Gwenllian met his gaze steadily. Gothic declared me a traitor, put a price on my head large enough to make every hunter in the valley take up his cause. So Airlis and I ran. Your husband? The question emerged carefully neutral. Dead 3 years now. Fever took him during the autumn harvest. The old grief sat lighter now, worn smooth by time and necessity. It's been just Airlis and me since then. Emrys absorbed this in silence, his attention shifting between mother and daughter with an expression Gwenllian couldn't decipher. Finally, he straightened, decision clearly made. Then I will ensure Gothic troubles you no further. The cold promise in his voice sent ice down Gwenllian's spine. What do you mean? I mean that I have tolerated that bloodline's cruelty for long enough. I am not the protector I once was, but I am still lord of these mountains in ways that matter to the old powers. His smile held no warmth, only predatory intent. Gothic will receive a message tonight. By dawn, he will withdraw his hunters, or face consequences his mortal mind cannot begin to comprehend. You can't, Gwenllian started, then stopped. Who was she to tell a 600-year-old vampire what he could or couldn't do? Violence will only bring more violence. Not the violence I propose. Emrys moved to the door, pausing before he left. I will not kill him, if that's your concern. Merely remind him of older laws, older authorities, the kind that ruled these lands before his grandfather's grandfather drew breath. He glanced back, and for just a moment the ancient lord showed through the cursed monster. Some messages require fangs to be properly understood. Before Gwenllian could protest further, he was gone silent as shadow, leaving only the faint scent of winter and old stone in his wake. Airlis looked up from her breakfast, violet eyes bright. I like him, Mama. He's sad, but he's trying to be brave. Yes, darling. Gwenllian pulled her daughter close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I think perhaps we all are. Outside, the mist thickened around the manor's ruins like a shroud, and somewhere in the darkness beneath stone and earth, an ancient predator prepared to remind the world why monsters were to be feared. Not for their violence, Gwenllian realized with a chill, but for their terrible, immortal patience. Chapter 3. The Lord of Ruins. The day passed in strange suspension, too slow and too fast at once, measured in Airlis's questions and the weight of Gwenllian's growing awareness that they were not, precisely, prisoners. But neither were they truly free. Emrys did not reappear, yet his presence filled the manor like breath in frozen air, invisible but undeniable. Twice, Gwenllian heard footsteps in distant corridors. Once, she glimpsed a shadow moving past their chamber door with inhuman fluidity. The fire never died. Fresh water appeared in the wash basin when her back was turned. It was care delivered through absence, protection woven from silence. It unnerved her more than threats would have. Mama, can we explore? Airlis asked for the third time, pressing her nose against the window to peer at the ruined gardens below. Frost had etched elaborate patterns across dead rose bushes, transforming decay into crystalline beauty. Not yet, darling. We should. A knock interrupted her refusal. 3 measured taps, identical to this morning's announcement. Gwenllian's heart performed an uncomfortable leap. Enter. Emrys stepped inside, and the temperature seemed to drop several degrees with his presence. He'd changed again, this time into charcoal wool and black leather that made him look every inch the warrior lord he must have been centuries ago. His hair was pulled back, exposing the sharp lines of his face, the inhuman perfection of his features. I have a request, he said without preamble. A request. Gwenllian heard the skepticism in her own voice. Not a command? Something that might have been amusement flickered in his expression. I am not Lord Gothic, healer. I do not mistake power for authority, nor immortality for wisdom. He remained near the doorway, careful to maintain distance. Your daughter asked this morning if curses could be broken. I have a proposition related to that question. Gwenllian's instincts prickled warning. What kind of proposition? In 6 centuries I have consulted every text, every mystic, every creature of power who might possess knowledge of my affliction. His words came measured, controlled, but beneath them something desperate churned. All have told me the same truth. The curse cannot be broken. It can only be modified, eased, made bearable through very specific circumstances. What circumstances? Gwenllian asked, though part of her already sensed the answer's shape. Emrys's gaze shifted to Airlys, who watched their exchange with bright interest. When he spoke again, his voice gentled into something almost fragile. Blood given freely, by one who bears no fear or hatred, can strengthen the cursed. It does not break the chains, but it lightens their weight. He turned back to Gwenllian, and she saw centuries of loneliness etched into immortal features. I have not fed from a willing human in over 200 years. I have survived on animals, on the dregs of life that can be taken without consent. It sustains existence, but not truly living. Understanding crashed over Gwenllian like cold water. You want my blood. I want your choice. The correction came swift, absolute, and I offer fair trade in return. Tonight, when I take you through the tunnels, we will face dangers I can barely hold at bay in my weakened state. But if I were stronger, if I carried even a fraction of the power freely given blood provides, I could ensure your safety absolutely. His hands curled into fists at his sides. I could also maintain the wards around this manor strong enough that Kadok's men would never dare approach, even after you've gone. Your passage north could be made utterly safe, invisible to mortal tracking. It was logical, practical, a fair exchange of resources for protection. So why did Gwenllian's heart hammer against her ribs like a trapped bird? How much blood? She asked, surprised by the steadiness of her voice. Not enough to weaken you. A mouthful, perhaps two. Enough to forge a connection, to let the gift's power flow through the curse. He took one step closer, then stopped himself with visible effort. I swear on whatever tattered honor remains in this immortal shell, that I will take only what you offer. No more. Never more. Airlys tugged at Gwenllian's sleeve. Will it hurt, Mama? Emrys lowered himself slowly until he knelt before the child, just as he had last night. The gesture of respect, of making himself small and vulnerable, sent something strange through Gwenllian's chest. It will hurt a little, like a bee sting, he told Airlys honestly. But I will be very gentle, and your mama is very brave, braver than most who have lived 10 of her lifetimes. She is brave, Airlys agreed solemnly. Then, with a child's unerring instinct for truth, are you going to keep us safe? With everything I am, with everything I have left. The vow emerged raw, unguarded. I have failed to protect those I cared for before. I will not fail again. Gwenllian studied him, this ancient creature kneeling before her daughter, making promises with the weight of centuries behind them. Every lesson she'd learned about vampires screamed danger. Every instinct honed through years of healing whispered that trust, once broken, could never be mended. But she'd spent 3 days running, 3 days watching Airlys grow thinner, more afraid, more aware that the world held cruelties neither of them could escape alone. Sometimes survival required taking the scalpel's edge in hand. If I agree, Gwenllian said slowly, I want to understand the process, the mechanics of it, how your body processes blood, how the curse transforms voluntary feeding into power. Emrys blinked, clearly not expecting clinical curiosity. You want a medical explanation? I'm a healer. I don't give my blood to something I don't understand. She crossed her arms, falling into the professional detachment that had carried her through countless difficult treatments. Explain it to me. All of it. For the first time since entering, something like respect flickered across his features. He rose with fluid grace and moved to the window, where weak afternoon light couldn't quite reach him. The curse rewrites the body's fundamental nature, he began, and Gwenllian heard the echo of countless years spent studying his own affliction. The heart still beats, but slowly, perhaps twice per hour rather than every second. Blood no longer carries oxygen but instead circulates the curse's magic, the binding that keeps this flesh immortal and unchanging. So you're essentially animated by the curse rather than life force, Gwenllian murmured, her mind already categorizing, analyzing. Precisely. Which means I require external sources of vital energy to maintain function. Animal blood provides base sustenance enough to prevent deterioration, but not enough to truly thrive. His fingers traced absent patterns on the frost-covered glass. Human blood, freely given, carries something more: intent, will. The gift itself becomes part of the power, transforming mere sustenance into genuine strength. And blood taken by force? Gwenllian asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. sustains but corrupts, strengthens but degrades. Every vampire who feeds through violence becomes more monster, less self, until nothing remains but hunger wearing a human face. His reflection in the window looked haunted. I have seen it happen to others of my kind. Watch them descend into madness one stolen life at a time. It is why I chose isolation over power, silence over satiation. The honesty of it, the raw acknowledgement of how close he walked to. Darkness struck Gwenllian deeply. This wasn't a monster making excuses. This was someone fighting desperately to remain human in the face of an inhuman curse. What happens during the feeding itself? She pressed. Physiologically? Emery's turned to face her fully, crimson eyes sharp with focus. My saliva contains a natural anesthetic, a mercy the curse provides. There will be a sharp sting when fangs pierce flesh, then numbness. Most describe the sensation as... He paused, searching for words. Warm, floating, not unpleasant, though the knowledge of what's happening can be disturbing. And for you? The question seemed to catch him off guard. For me? What do you experience? Gwenllian asked, genuine curiosity overriding caution. If I'm to understand this exchange fully, I need to know both sides of it. Emrys went very still. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. I experience everything. Every heartbeat, every breath, every emotion, carried in the blood. For those few moments I am connected to life again, feeling warmth, tasting mortality, remembering what it was to be human and whole. His hands clenched. It is the closest thing to grace left in this existence. And it is why consent matters so deeply. To violate that connection, to take it by force, it would be to destroy the only sacred thing my curse allows. Silence stretched between them, heavy with understanding. Gwenllian's analytical mind catalogued the information. Curse-bound immortality, magical rather than biological sustenance, emotional resonance through blood connection. But beneath the clinical assessment, something else stirred recognition of shared isolation, of two people who'd learned to survive through careful control and constant vigilance. Mama? Airless's small voice broke the spell. Are you going to help him? Gwenllian looked down at her daughter, seeing wisdom far beyond 5 years in those violet eyes. Then she looked back at Emrys, at the ancient lord who'd knelt before a child and made promises he clearly intended to keep. Yes, she said quietly. I'll help him. The relief that washed over Emrys's features was almost painful to witness, raw and unguarded, centuries of need stripped bare for one vulnerable moment. Thank you. The words emerged rough. Thank you. But we do this properly, Gwenllian continued, slipping back into healer's authority. I want to examine the puncture site after. Monitor my own reactions. Understand the full physiological impact. Despite the gravity of the moment, Emrys's lips quirked into something almost like a smile. Of course. I would expect nothing less from someone who demands medical explanations from vampires. Good. Then we understand each other. Gwenllian moved to the chair near the fireplace, settling herself with the calm she'd cultivated through years of difficult procedures. How do we begin? Emrys approached slowly, each step measured as though moving through deep water. He knelt beside the chair, bringing himself level with her seated position. Up close, Gwenllian could see details hidden at a distance. Faint scars along his jawline, the way candlelight caught in his dark hair, the absolute stillness of his chest between those rare, slow heartbeats. Your wrist or your throat, he said quietly. Wrist is less intimate but takes longer. Throat is faster, more efficient, but requires greater trust. Gwenllian's pulse jumped traitorously. Wrist, I think. For the first time. First time. The implication that there might be others hung unspoken between them. She extended her left hand, watching clinical detachment war with very human anxiety as Emrys cradled her wrist with surprising gentleness. His skin was cool, not corpse cold as folklore suggested, but noticeably lower than human warmth. Tell me if you want me to stop, he murmured, and then he lowered his mouth to her pulse point. The sting came sharp and bright, painful but bearable, exactly as he'd promised. Then warmth flooded through her veins, numbing spreading from the puncture site up her arm. Gwenllian's analytical mind tried to track the sensation, to categorize and understand, but the feeling of connection overwhelmed clinical observation. She could sense him, not thoughts exactly, but emotions rendered physical. Desperate hunger tempered by iron control, profound gratitude mixing with old shame, and beneath it all, loneliness so deep and vast it had its own weight. its own gravity. Gwenllian gasped softly. Emery's froze, mouth still against her wrist. Too much? The question emerged muffled, concerned. No, just intense. Her free hand found his shoulder without conscious thought, steadying them both. I'm all right. Continue. He did, and Gwenllian felt the pull as he drew blood, gentle but unmistakable, her life flowing into his curse. The room seemed to dim and brighten simultaneously. Her heartbeat echoed loud in her ears, each pulse a small gift willingly given. Then it was over. Emery's pulled back, carefully licking the puncture wounds closed. The gesture should have been disturbing, but instead felt almost reverent completion of a ritual, sealing of a pact. When he met her eyes, his own had brightened to vivid scarlet, burning with renewed vitality. Color had returned to his pale skin. His shoulders sat straighter. He looked more alive than he had mere moments before, despite being fundamentally dead. Are you well? He asked, voice steadier and stronger than it had been all day. Gwenllian examined her wrist, 2 small marks already healing, barely visible. Her head felt light, but not dangerously so. Her pulse ran quick but strong. Physically, she'd experienced no significant depletion. Emotionally, that was more complicated. I'm well, she confirmed, and meant it. You? Emery's exhaled slowly, and for the first time Gwenllian heard wonder in his voice. I feel like I could move, the mountains themselves, like I could hold back dawn with my bare hands. He looked at his own palms as though seeing them anew. This is what strength feels like. I'd forgotten. After so long surviving rather than living, I'd forgotten how powerful even a small gift could be. Airlies, who'd been watching wide-eyed from the bed, scrambled down and approached cautiously. Your eyes are brighter. You look less sad. I am less sad, little star. Emery smiled at her. A real smile. Warm and genuine, and Gwenllian's traitorous heart performed another uncomfortable leap. Your mother just gave me a gift beyond price. I intend to honor it. By keeping us safe tonight, Gwenllian said, needing to ground the moment in practicality before the intimacy of what they'd just shared overwhelmed her. By keeping you safe always. The vow came absolute. The tunnels, the hunters, Caddock himself, none will touch you while I draw breath. However slowly that breath comes. That's a large promise. From someone who claims to have failed before, Gwenllian pointed out, trying for skepticism and landing somewhere closer to hope. Then perhaps I have learned from 6 centuries of failure. Emery's rose, moving to the window where sunset was beginning to paint the sky in shades of blood and gold. We leave when full dark falls. Pack light. Bring only what you absolutely need. And after? Gwenllian asked. After we reach the Northern Territories? What then? He didn't turn around, but she saw his shoulders tense. Then you'll be free of this cursed manor, this dangerous lord, and the complications my existence brings. Pause. Isn't that what you want? It should have been. It was the sensible answer, the safe choice. But Gwenllian looked at Airlies, at the way her daughter watched Emery's with open fascination rather than fear, and remembered the loneliness she'd felt in his blood, 600 years of isolation wearing grooves into an immortal soul. I want my daughter safe, she said carefully. I want to build a life where we're not running, not hiding, not afraid. She met his gaze in the window's reflection. But I think perhaps that's what you want too. And maybe those wants aren't as incompatible as we both fear. Emery's turned slowly, crimson eyes wide with something that looked dangerously like hope. Healer, I am a monster bound by curse and blood. Whatever life you build, it should be in sunlight, among the living, not in shadow with the dead. You're not dead. The certainty in Gwenllian's voice surprised even herself. You're cursed. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, she stood, meeting his gaze directly, despite the power radiating from him in waves. The dead don't make promises. They don't kneel before children. They don't spend centuries fighting to maintain their humanity against impossible odds. She took one step closer. You are many things, Emery's, but dead isn't one of them. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, this mortal healer, who'd somehow seen past 6 centuries of carefully constructed walls in the space of 2 days. When he finally spoke, his voice emerged raw and broken. You offer me hope I have no right to hold. I offer you truth, Gwenllian corrected gently. What you do with it is your choice. Outside, the sun slipped below the mountains, and night rose to claim the ruins. Somewhere in the valley below, hunters sharpened their weapons and prepared for pursuit. But in that room, illuminated by firelight and possibility, 3 souls stood balanced on the edge of something that might have been salvation or damnation or both together. The curse had bound Emrys to darkness for 600 years. But perhaps, Gwenllian thought with a healer's stubborn hope, the right kind of light could still reach him. They would find out tonight, in the deep places beneath stone, where old promises and new choices would be tested against the weight of immortal loneliness and mortal love. Chapter 4. Into the dark. Full darkness came like a held breath finally released, complete and absolute, the kind of lightlessness that existed only in wild places where human presence had long since faded into memory. Emrys stood at the threshold of their chamber, transformed by nightfall into something even more otherworldly than before. The crimson of his eyes glowed brighter in shadow, casting faint red light across his features. The strength from Gwenllian's blood hummed through him visibly in the confidence of his posture, the fluidity of his movements, the way power seemed to radiate from his very presence. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice low and commanding. Gwenllian adjusted the pack on her shoulders light as instructed, containing only essential medicines, a change of clothes for Airlys, and the few precious items she'd managed to save when they fled. Airlys stood at her side, small hand gripping Gwenllian's tightly, violet eyes wide but trusting. "We're ready," Gwenllian confirmed. Emrys nodded once, then moved into the corridor with predatory grace. Gwenllian and Airlys followed, their footsteps echoing against stone, while his made no sound at all. Candles ignited themselves as they passed, flames burning an eerie blue-white that cast everything in shades of ice and shadow. "The tunnels run deep beneath the manor," Emrys explained as he led them down a spiral staircase that seemed to descend into the mountain's very heart. "They were carved centuries before my time by those who first settled these peaks. When I inherited the manor, I reinforced them, warded them, made them safe from most threats." "Most threats," Gwenllian repeated, catching the qualifier. "The deep places attract things that shun sunlight as thoroughly as I do. Not all of them respect territorial boundaries." His hand rested on the hilt of a blade Gwenllian hadn't noticed before, ancient steel that gleamed with its own faint luminescence. "But with the strength you've given me, I can ensure safe passage." The staircase ended in a vast chamber carved from living rock. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like stone teeth, and water dripped somewhere in the darkness beyond the candle's reach. A tunnel mouth yawned before them, perfectly circular, clearly artificial despite its age, lined with stones carved in symbols Gwenllian didn't recognize. "Wards," Emrys said, gesturing to the markings. "They'll recognize me as this place's keeper. Stay close. Don't touch the walls." He reached back without looking, and Gwenllian found her hand enveloped in his before conscious thought could engage. His skin remained cool, but strength pulsed through his grip, steady, unbreakable, somehow reassuring despite its inhuman origin. Airlys took Gwenllian's other hand, and together they stepped into the tunnel. Darkness swallowed them whole, but Emrys walked forward without hesitation, his eyes providing enough red-tinted light to illuminate the path ahead. The tunnel stretched endlessly, sloping downward at a gentle grade, its walls smooth and ancient. Strange sounds echoed from side passages, whispers that might have been wind, or might have been something else entirely. "Mama, it's very dark," Airlys whispered. "I know, darling. But we're safe. Emrys is with us. I will let nothing harm you," the vampire confirmed, and the absolute certainty in his voice sent strange warmth through Gwenllian's chest. "We have perhaps an hour's walk ahead. The path is long, but it's the only route that bypasses Cadoc's patrols entirely." They walked in silence for a time. The only sounds their breathing, 2 sets, Gwenllian noted Emrys, remained utterly quiet, and the soft scuff of boots against ancient stone. The air grew colder, carrying scents of mineral and water and something older, harder to define. "Tell me about the manor," Gwenllian said eventually, needing to fill the oppressive quiet. "About when it was whole." Emrys's grip on her hand tightened, fractionally. "You want stories of better days?" "I want to understand who you were. Before the curse." He remained silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, words began to emerge, halting at first, then flowing more freely, as though 6 centuries of silence had built a dam finally ready to break. "The manor housed 3 generations of my family when I took lordship. My father had just passed, and the responsibility fell to me at barely 22. His voice carried the weight of impossible distance. Memory filtered through immortal perspective. "I was young, idealistic, certain I could protect every soul in these mountains if I just worked hard enough, cared deeply enough. That's not idealism, Gwenllian murmured. That's love. Love that made me vulnerable to the bargain when plague came. Bitterness colored his tone. I watched people I'd known since childhood waste away, watched children sicken and die. The Red Death took them slowly, painfully, turning blood to poison from the inside out. No healer could stop it. No medicine could slow it. Gwenllian's professional mind cataloged symptoms automatically. Blood poisoning, systemic infection, probably bacterial or parasitic in nature. But she said nothing, letting him continue. The creature that offered the bargain appeared one night in my father's study. Old, powerful, something that had walked the earth since before humans built their first fires. It offered me a choice. Watch my people die, or trade my mortality for their salvation. His laugh held no humor. I accepted without hesitation, thought myself noble, self-sacrificing, a hero from old songs. You were trying to save lives, Gwenllian said quietly. There's no shame in that. Isn't there? They rounded a corner, and the tunnel opened into a larger cavern where an underground stream cut through rock, water glowing faintly with natural phosphorescence. Emery's paused at its edge, crimson eyes reflecting in the luminescent current. The plague lifted. My people survived, and I became this thing that could never walk among them again. They feared me, fled from me. The children I'd played with threw stones. The elders I'd respected called for my destruction. So you hid, Gwenllian finished softly. So I hid, built wards to keep them safe from what I'd become, watched from shadows as they rebuilt their lives without me, lived with the knowledge that my sacrifice had been both necessary and utterly isolating. He turned to face her, and the pain in his expression was almost unbearable. Do you understand now? This is what I am, what I will always be. A protector who can only protect from a distance, a lord with no people, a man who gave up humanity for love and lost everything love required. Gwenllian wanted to argue, to offer comfort, to somehow fill the 600-year wound his words had exposed. But before she could speak, Airlys tugged at Emery's hand, the one still clasping. Gwenllian's, connecting all three. That's a very sad story, the child said solemnly. But Mama says sad stories can have better endings if we're brave enough to write them. Emery's looked down at Airlys, expression cracking into something raw and vulnerable. Does she? She does, Gwenllian confirmed, finding her voice. And she's right. The past is written. Emery's. But the future. She squeezed his hand gently. The future is still unfolding. You don't have to face it alone anymore if you don't choose to. You offer too much to someone who has no right to it. I offer what I wish to give, freely. Isn't that the entire principle you explained to me? That gifts given freely hold power that taken things never can? He stared at her, and Gwenllian watched understanding bloom across his features, recognition that she'd turned his own words into an offering, a promise, a possibility he'd stopped allowing himself to imagine. Healer, Gwenllian, she interrupted gently. My name is Gwenllian. If we're going to challenge 6 centuries of isolation, you should at least use my name, Gwenllian. He spoke it like a prayer, like something precious and dangerous together. I don't know how to do this, how to let someone close after so long alone. Neither do I, she admitted. I've been running, surviving, protecting Airlys for 3 years. I've forgotten how to trust, how to hope for anything beyond the next safe dawn. She took a breath, deciding. But I think we could learn together, if you're willing. The cavern fell silent except for the gentle rush of luminescent water. Emery stood utterly still. Centuries of careful control warring with something newer. More fragile hope wearing uncertainty's face. Then, slowly, he raised their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture from a more courtly age, formal yet intimate, heavy with meaning. I am willing, he whispered against her skin. Though I fear I will fail you, disappoint you, prove unable to be what you and Airlys deserve. We all fear that, Gwenllian said softly. But fear doesn't negate choice. It just makes the choosing braver. Airlys, apparently satisfied with the adults' exchange, tugged at both their hands. Can we keep walking? My feet are getting cold. The absurd normalcy of the complaint broke the moment's intensity. Emery's laughed, actually laughed, the sound echoing through the cavern like music long forgotten. Yes, little star, we can keep walking. He released Gwenllian's hand reluctantly, then surprised her by sweeping Airlys up onto his shoulders in one fluid motion. Better? Airlise squealed with delight. I can see everything from up here. Then you can be our lookout, Emery said, voice warm with something that sounded dangerously like affection. Tell me if you see anything unusual. They continued forward, Emery's carrying Airlise while Gwenllian walked beside them, and the tunnels seemed less oppressive now, less like tomb and more like passage, journey from one life toward another. But the peace didn't last. A sound echoed from ahead, low and grating, like stone scraping against stone. Emery's froze instantly, every muscle tensing. He lifted Airlise from his shoulders and placed her gently behind him, gesturing for Gwenllian to do the same. What is it? Gwenllian whispered. Something that shouldn't be here. His hand found the hilt of his blade, something old enough to ignore wards. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, stay behind me. The scraping grew louder, accompanied now by a sound like breathing wet and labored, echoing against stone. From the darkness ahead, something moved. It emerged into the phosphorescent glow slowly, and Gwenllian's healer training was the only thing that kept her from screaming. The creature stood perhaps 8 feet tall, its body a grotesque fusion of stone and flesh, humanoid in basic shape but wrong in every detail. Its skin looked like living granite, cracked and seeping, something dark and viscous. Where eyes should have been, empty sockets glowed with the same eerie light that filled the underground stream. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, revealing teeth like stalactites. Stonewalker. Emery's breathed, and Gwenllian heard fear, actual fear in his voice. Ancient guardian, probably sleeping for decades before our passage woke it. The creature's head swiveled toward them with a sound like grinding millstones. It spoke, voice resonating from deep within its chest. Trespasser, violator. This place is sacred. You will become part of the stone. I am Emery's, Lord of the Mountain's heart, the vampire called back, blade now drawn and gleaming. I hold right of passage through these tunnels by ancient treaty. We mean no disrespect to sacred ground. The Stonewalker considered this with alien patience. Then, treaty is old, treaty is broken. All who walk here become stone. Stone is eternal, stone is peace. It moved with terrifying speed for new, something carved from rock, lunging forward with arms extended. Emery's met it with preternatural grace, his blade flashing in the dim light. Steel met stone with a sound like thunder. Run! Emery shouted to Gwenllian without looking back. Take Airlise and run. The tunnel continues straight. Follow the water, you'll reach the surface, exit within half a mile. I'm not leaving you, Gwenllian shouted back, even as she pulled Airlise close. You must. I cannot fight and protect you both. He ducked under a massive stone fist, his blade scoring a line across the creature's torso that wept luminescent ichor. Gwenllian, please, I cannot lose you. Go. The raw desperation in his voice decided it. Gwenllian grabbed Airlise's hand and ran, the child's feet barely touching the ground as they fled into darkness. Behind them, sounds of combat echoed, stone breaking, steel singing, a vampire's furious roar mixing with a guardian's grinding wail. They ran until Gwenllian's lungs burned, until Airlise was crying, until the sounds of battle had faded into terrible silence. Then she stopped, breath heaving, and made a choice that would have been foolish 3 days ago. Stay here, she told Airlise, pressing her daughter into a small alcove in the tunnel wall. Don't move, don't make a sound. I'll be back. Mama, no. I have to help him, darling. He's fighting that thing alone because of us. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't let him do that. She pressed a kiss to Airlise's forehead, then turned and ran back the way they'd come, following the sounds of battle, guided by nothing but stubborn conviction and the memory of his hand in hers. When she emerged into the cavern again, what she saw stopped her heart. Emery's knelt on the stone floor, his blade shattered beside him. The Stonewalker loomed over him, one massive hand wrapped around his throat, lifting him slowly. Cracks spread across Emery's skin, actual stone beginning to consume flesh, the curse that made him. Immortal, unable to prevent transformation into something worse. No! Gwenllian's scream echoed through the cavern. The Stonewalker's head turned toward her. Another trespasser. Good. You will make beautiful stone. Still, peaceful, perfect. But Emery's used the moment of distraction. With his last reserves of strength Gwenllian's blood had given him, he drove his hand into the Stonewalker's chest, fingers piercing granite like water. The creature howled, its grip loosened. Emery's fell to his knees, stone corruption spreading up his arms. Across his chest, he looked at Gwenllian, and his crimson eyes held terrible resignation. Run, he whispered through lips beginning to harden. "Gwenllian, run. Don't let my failure claim you too." But Gwenllian was already moving not away from him but toward him. Her healer's mind raced through every scrap of lore she knew about curses, about magic, about the power of freely given gifts. If blood could strengthen, she grabbed the shard of Emrys's shattered blade and drew it across her palm in one sharp motion. Blood welled immediately rich, red, pulsing with mortal life. "Take it," she commanded, pressing her bleeding hand to his lips. "Take what I offer freely. Fight." For one suspended moment, nothing happened. Then Emry's eyes blazed scarlet bright. His mouth closed over her palm, drinking deeply, and Gwenllian felt the connection snap into place stronger than before. Deeper, more fundamental. Her heartbeat became his heartbeat. Her warmth flooded through his veins. Her will to survive poured into his curse-bound flesh. The stone corruption stopped spreading, began to recede. Emry surged to his feet with a roar that shook the cavern, Gwenllian's blood burning through him like living fire. He struck the stonewalker with his bare hands, and where he touched, granite shattered. The creature stumbled backward, glowing eyes wide with something that might have been shock. "You cannot harm what I protect," Emry snarled, and his voice held the weight of 6 centuries of accumulated power, all of it focused on this single moment. "You cannot take what I have sworn to keep safe. I am Lord here by blood and bond, and you will stand aside." The declaration rang through the cavern with physical force. The wards carved into the tunnel walls blazed to life brilliant gold instead of their previous faint shimmer. The stonewalker looked around, seeming to see them for the first time in decades. Then, slowly, it lowered its head. Lord Bond recognized, blood oath accepted, passage granted. It stepped aside, movement stiff but deliberate. "Walk in peace, protector. The stone remembers its treaties." The creature melted back into the cavern wall, becoming part of the stone from which it had emerged, leaving only silence in its wake. Emry swayed, exhaustion catching up to power's retreat. Gwenllian caught him before he could fall, supporting his weight despite the absurdity of trying to hold up. Someone with 600 years and supernatural strength. "I told you to run," he murmured against her hair. "I don't take orders well," she replied, voice shaking with adrenaline and relief, especially not from stubborn vampires who think dying alone is somehow noble. "Foolish healer, foolish vampire." He laughed, broken and breathless, but genuine. Then he pulled back enough to look at her, and the raw emotion in his expression made her breath catch. "You came back for me. You could have escaped, could have taken Airlys to safety. But you came back." "Of course I did." Gwenllian pressed her uninjured hand to his cheek, feeling the solidity of him, not stone, not death, but something alive in its own cursed way. That's what people do when they're choosing each other. They don't run, they stay. "Gwenllian." Her name emerged ragged with wonder and disbelief together. But before he could say more, a small voice echoed from the tunnel. "Mama? Mr. Emrys? Are you alive?" "We're alive, darling," Gwenllian called back. "You can come out now." Airlys appeared moments later, running full speed to throw her arms around both of them. Emrys caught her automatically, and Gwenllian found herself wrapped in an embrace with both her daughter and an immortal vampire who'd somehow become essential in the space of 2 impossible days. "That was very scary," Airlys declared, voice muffled against Emrys's chest. "But you were very brave, both of you." "Your mother was brave," Emrys corrected softly. "I was merely desperate not to fail her." "Same thing," Airlys said with a child's certainty. "And maybe," Gwenllian thought as they stood together in that ancient cavern while phosphorescent water sang and wards glowed golden. Maybe it was. They continued forward together, slower now. Emrys' strength depleted despite the power Gwenllian's blood had provided. But the tunnels offered no more challenges. The path opened before them like a promise kept, and after what felt like both hours and moments, they emerged into moonlight. The exit brought them out on a mountainside far north of the manor, beyond any territory Lord Caddock could claim. Below, lights from a village glittered like fallen stars. Above, the moon hung full and bright, bathing the landscape in silver. Emry stopped at the tunnel's mouth, where moonlight pooled thick and healing. He tilted his face upward, breathing in night air with something like prayer on his features. "You're free," he said quietly, not looking at Gwenllian. "The north is yours now. Caddock cannot follow. You and Airlys can build that life you dreamed of. Safe, whole, unburdened by curses and darkness." It was release, permission, the freedom he'd promised. Gwenllian knew she should take it. should gather earlies and walk toward that village, toward normal life, toward everything they'd fled seeking. Instead, she reached out and took his hand again. "And if I choose to be burdened?" she asked softly. "If I decide that curses and darkness are worth facing if they come with stubborn vampires who fight stonewalkers for our safety." Emery's fingers tightened around hers convulsively. "Gwenllian, you cannot mean— I mean exactly what I'm saying. You asked earlier if I wanted freedom." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the chill of his skin, the absolute stillness between heartbeats. "I want choice. I want to choose you. If you'll have us." "Have you?" His voice broke on the words. "I am cursed, alone, damned to darkness." "You are none of those things anymore," Gwenllian interrupted firmly. "You're choosing to be less alone, and maybe together we can find a way to make darkness bearable. Maybe even beautiful." He stared at her like she'd offered him the sun itself impossible. Precious, terrifying in its brightness. "I don't know how to be what you need," he whispered. "Neither do I, but I'm willing to learn." She smiled, feeling hope bloom warm in her chest. "What do you say, Emrys? Ready to try, choosing light for once, even if you can't stand in it directly?" For answer, he pulled her close carefully, reverently, as though she might shatter, and pressed his forehead to hers. When he spoke, his voice carried 6 centuries of loneliness, finally breaking. "Yes, if you'll teach me how." Above them, the moon shone bright and healing, washing away wounds and offering new beginnings to those brave enough to reach for them. The curse remained. The darkness still waited. But they would face both together now, and that made all the difference. Chapter 5. Moonlit Choices. The village inn sat warm and welcoming at the base of the mountain, its windows glowing amber against the night. Gwenllian stood before it with Airlys tucked sleepily against her side, and Emrys hovering at the edge of lamplight, too aware of his own strangeness to venture closer to human habitation. "You should go in," he said quietly. "Get proper rest, warm food. The innkeeper is honest. I've watched this village for decades. She'll not turn away a woman and child in need." "And you?" Gwenllian asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "I'll keep watch. Ensure no pursuit followed us through the tunnels." His gaze scanned the darkness with predatory focus. "When dawn approaches, I'll return to the manor before the light can—" "No." The single word stopped him mid-sentence. He turned to stare at her, confusion evident in the tilt of his head. "No?" he echoed. "You heard me." Gwenllian shifted Airlys more comfortably in her arms, the child already half asleep and dreaming. "I didn't choose to be with you just so you could immediately retreat to 600 years of isolation. If we're doing this, actually doing this, then we figure it out together. Gwenllian, I cannot simply walk into a village inn. Look at me." He gestured to himself, the inhuman beauty, the crimson eyes, the predatory stillness that marked him as other. "I inspire fear, not welcome. Then, we'll find another way." She glanced around, healer's mind already solving problems. The village had outbuildings, storage sheds, a barn at the edge of the common where travelers sometimes sheltered. There, the barn. It'll have hay for bedding, walls to block the wind. Airlys and I can rest there while you keep watch, and in the morning we'll plan our next steps. Together. Emrys looked like he wanted to argue. 6 centuries of self-imposed solitude probably screamed that he should argue, should maintain distance, should protect her from the complications his existence brought. But instead, he simply nodded. "Together, then." The barn proved serviceable, old but well-maintained, smelling of animals and hay and honest labor. Gwenllian fashioned a makeshift bed from fresh straw, while Emrys stood guard at the entrance, his form a dark silhouette against the star-filled sky. "Will you tell me something?" Gwenllian asked once she'd settled Airlys into sleep, the child's soft breathing, steady in the quiet. "Ask anything." Emrys didn't turn from his vigil, but she heard a tension in his voice, that preternatural focus he brought to everything. "When Airlys called you daddy that first night," Gwenllian paused, choosing words carefully. "You froze. Not just surprise, devastation. Why?" Silence stretched long enough that Gwenllian thought he might not answer. Then, slowly, words began to emerge, rough with old grief. "I had a daughter once, before the curse, before immortality." His shoulders curved inward slightly. "Her name was Katrin. She was 6 when the plague came. When I made the bargain, understanding crashed over Gwenllian like cold water." "Oh, Emrys. She survived the Red Death, live to grow up, to marry, to have children of her own. I watched from the shadows as she aged, as she built a life I could no longer be part of. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She died of old age 73 years after I became this thing. I counted. Every day. Mourned every moment I couldn't be her father anymore. Gwenllian's throat tightened with sympathy. And when Airlys called you for one impossible second, I thought. He stopped, clearly struggling with words. I thought perhaps the universe was offering me redemption, a chance to be what I'd failed to be for Katrin. Then reality reasserted itself, and I remembered what I am, what I can never be again. You're wrong. Gwenllian stood, moving to stand beside him at the barn's entrance. Moonlight painted them both in shades of silver. You are exactly what you were then, someone who loves fiercely enough to sacrifice everything for those who matter. The curse didn't take that from you. It just made expressing it harder. Harder. His laugh held no humor. I am a creature that feeds on blood, burns in sunlight, and will outlive everyone I dare to care for. How is that anything but cruel to subject you and Airlys to? Because we get to choose too. Gwenllian reached for his hand, feeling the cool strength of his fingers as they wrapped around hers. You're so focused on what you take, blood, time, normal life, that you're ignoring what you give, protection, loyalty. 6 centuries of accumulated wisdom and power bent toward keeping us safe. That's not cruel, Emrys. That's gift. He turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight, his features seemed less inhuman, more simply beautiful ancient sorrow softened by present wonder. How do you do that? He asked quietly. How do you take 6 centuries of self-loathing and reframe it into something almost noble? I'm a healer. I don't see sickness. I see symptoms that can be treated. I don't see monsters. I see patients who hurt. She squeezed his hand gently. And you, Emrys, have been hurting for a very long time. I'd like to help heal that, if you'll let me. Gwenllian. Her name emerged ragged. I'm not saying it will be easy. I'm not promising there won't be complications, difficulties, moments when the curse feels too heavy to bear. She met his crimson gaze steadily. But I am saying you don't have to bear it alone anymore. Not if you choose to let us in. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, this mortal woman, who'd somehow seen past every defense, every carefully constructed wall, straight to the broken heart of him. Then he raised their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles again. That courtly gesture that managed to be both formal and achingly intimate. I choose to let you in, he whispered against her skin. Though I fear I will prove unworthy of the trust. We'll figure it out together, Gwenllian promised. That's what choosing each other means. A sound from the darkness made Emrys's head snap up, every muscle tensing. His free hand found the hilt of his blade new, pulled from the manor's armory before they'd left. Since his favored weapon had shattered against the stone walker. Someone approaches, he murmured, positioning himself between Gwenllian and the barn's entrance. Stay behind me. But the figure that emerged from shadow proved surprisingly non-threatening. An elderly woman wrapped in heavy shawls, carrying a lantern that cast warm gold light across weathered features. Peace, Lord of the Mountain, she called, voice creaking with age but carrying surprising strength. I mean no harm to you or yours. Emrys didn't relax, but he didn't draw steel either. You know what I am. We all know what you are. Have known for generations. The old woman approached slowly, unthreatening, until she stood at the edge of the lantern's glow. My grandmother's grandmother told stories of the cursed lord, who traded mortality for salvation. Said you still watch over the mountain, keep darker things at bay, ensure the old evils stay sleeping in stone. Your people threw stones at me when I tried to walk among them, Emrys said flatly. Aye, the fools did. Fear makes folk cruel. She shifted her lantern, illuminating her face more clearly, kind eyes, deep wrinkles, the sort of face that had seen much and judged little. But time teaches wisdom to those who live long enough. We know what protects us in the dark. We know the price that was paid. She set down a basket Gwenllian hadn't noticed before, pushing it toward them with one foot. Bread, cheese, dried meat, clean water and wine, blankets that'll keep the child warm. The old woman's gaze shifted to Gwenllian. For the healer and her daughter who fled Cadoc's madness. Word travels fast in the mountains. We know what you did saving the boy, refusing murder. That takes courage most lack. Gwenllian found her voice. Thank you. We can pay. Keep your coin. We pay our debts to the Mountain Lord in other ways. The woman glanced at Emrys, and something like respect colored her expression. 600 years you've kept watch. Seems only right we offer hospitality when you finally stop hiding. Emrys looked genuinely shocked. I don't understand. Your people have feared me for centuries. Fear and gratitude can exist together, Lord. We feared the plague more. Feared the true monsters that used to hunt these peaks before your curse claimed them. She smiled, revealing gaps in her teeth. My grandmother used to say, you were proof that the best protectors are those who know what it costs to fail. Maybe she was right. The old woman turned to leave, then paused. The barn is yours for as long as you need it. No one will disturb your rest. And when you're ready to walk among us again properly. She met Emrys's crimson gaze directly. You'll find these mountains still remember their true lord, curse or no curse. She left as silently as she'd come, lantern light fading into the darkness until only moonlight remained. Emrys stood frozen, staring at the basket of supplies as though it were an impossibility made manifest. They remembered, he whispered, and Gwenllian heard 6 centuries of isolation cracking in those prophecy. 2 words. After all this time they remembered. Of course they did. Gwenllian moved to examine the basket's contents. Good quality provisions, clean blankets, even a child's doll tucked carefully at the bottom for Airlies. People remember protectors, Emrys, especially the ones who sacrifice everything. He turned to her, and tears glittered in his immortal eyes, crimson, catching moonlight like rubies. I thought I was forgotten. Thought the curse had erased every connection, every bond, every reason to exist beyond simple survival. You were never forgotten. Gwenllian took his face in both hands, feeling the coolness of his skin, the absolute stillness between heartbeats. You just convinced yourself you should be. There's a difference. Gwenllian. Her name emerged broken, raw, stripped of 6 centuries of careful control. Let it go, she urged gently. Whatever weight you've been carrying alone all this time, let it go. You don't have to be alone anymore. You don't have to hide. Something in him shattered, then some final wall crumbling after too many years holding back too much pressure. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and wept. 600 years of accumulated grief poured out in silent, shaking sobs that Gwenllian felt more than heard. She held him through it, this ancient creature reduced to fundamental human pain, and wondered if healing had ever felt quite so profound. I've got you, she murmured, hands gentle in his hair. I've got you, and I'm not letting go. How long they stood like that, Gwenllian couldn't say. Time felt suspended, measured only in the gradual easing of Emrys's shoulders, the slow return of his carefully cultivated composure. When he finally pulled back, his eyes had cleared, still crimson, still inhuman, but somehow warmer, more alive. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. Good thing I'm choosing you anyway, then. Gwenllian smiled, thumbs brushing away the last traces of tears from his cheeks. Now come on, let's get some rest. Tomorrow we figure out what comes next. Together. Together. He echoed, and the words sounded like vow and promise and beginning all at once. They settled in the barn's warmth, Airlies curled safely in blankets, Gwenllian tucked against one wall, and Emrys maintaining watch from the entrance where moonlight could reach him. But every so often, Gwenllian felt his gaze on her, no longer distant or guarded, but wondering and present, and almost hopeful. The curse remained. 600 years of accumulated darkness didn't simply vanish because one village remembered, and one healer chose to stay. But the weight of it, Gwenllian realized as sleep began to claim her, felt lighter now, shared. And that was what love did. She supposed not eliminate burden, but make it bearable by ensuring it was never carried alone. Outside, the moon traced its arc across the sky, and the mountains kept their ancient watch. Inside a simple barn, 3 souls rested together. For the first time in far too long, mortal and immortal, cursed and choosing, building something new from ruins and moonlight and stubborn hope. Dawn would come with its challenges, but tonight, they were safe. Tonight, they were together. Tonight, that was enough. Chapter 6. The Truth in Blood. Morning arrived with reluctance, dawn light seeping slowly through gaps in the barn's walls like an intruder testing defenses. Gwenllian woke to find Emrys already retreating to the darkest corner, wrapped in shadows and the heavy cloak he'd pulled from their supplies. How long until the sun becomes dangerous? She asked, voice still rough with sleep. Perhaps an hour before direct exposure would cause damage. Less if the clouds clear. He spoke from within his self-imposed darkness, only the faint crimson glow of his eyes visible. I've survived worse. I can wait until nightfall if necessary. You shouldn't have to. Gwenllian stood, careful not to wake Irelys, and moved to examine the barn more thoroughly. Her healer's mind catalogued possibilities. Thick wool blankets that could block light. A storage loft that would be darker. The old cart in the corner that might offer shelter. What are you doing? Emrys asked, watching her with wary curiosity. Problem solving. If we're going to build a life together, we need to address practicalities. She pulled the cart away from the wall, revealing a space beneath large enough for a man to shelter. This could work. If we line it with blankets, create a barrier from the sunlight. Gwenllian, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Because you matter. Because your comfort matters. She met his glowing eyes steadily across the dim barn. I'm not asking you to suffer through daylight for my sake, but I am asking you to let me help make things easier. That's what partners do. The word partners hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Is that what we are? Emrys asked quietly. Partners? Aren't we? Gwenllian countered. You've sworn to protect us. I've chosen to stay with you. Irelys has adopted you as something like family. If that's not partnership, what is it? I don't know. Honest confusion colored his tone. I've lived alone for so long. I've forgotten what it means to be part of something larger than solitary survival. Then we'll learn together. Gwenllian returned to arranging blankets, creating a makeshift shelter in the barn's darkest corner, starting with keeping you comfortable during daylight hours. Tell me what you need. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then, slowly, he began to help his superior strength, making quick work of moving heavy objects, his centuries of experience informing placement for maximum shadow coverage. They worked in companionable silence until Irelys woke, rubbing her eyes and peering around with a child's quick adjustment to new surroundings. Good morning, little star. Emrys called softly from his shadows. Morning? Irelys scrambled up, then paused. Why are you hiding? The sunlight hurts him, Gwenllian explained gently, helping her daughter with the bread and cheese from last night's basket. So we're making sure he has a safe place to rest during the day. Oh, Irelys considered this with the seriousness children brought to important matters. Will you be lonely while we're awake? The question clearly caught Emrys off guard. I'm used to being alone during daylight. That's not what I asked. Irelys' violet eyes, so much like her mother's, fixed on him with uncomfortable perception. Being used to lonely doesn't make it not sad. Emrys exhaled slowly. You're too clever for your age, little star. Mama says that too. Irelys took a bite of bread, chewing thoughtfully. I could tell you stories while you rest. If you want, so you're not lonely. Something in Emrys' expression cracked that careful mask he wore, slipping to reveal naked vulnerability beneath. I would like that. Very much. So while daylight strengthened outside and Gwenllian tended to practical matters, Irelys settled near Emrys' shelter and began to spin tales some remembered from her mother's telling, others invented on the spot with the wild creativity of childhood. Emrys listened with complete attention, occasionally asking questions or offering gentle corrections, and Gwenllian's heart ached watching them. This was what he'd lost when the curse had taken him from his daughter. This simple, profound connection, the ability to be present, to listen, to matter in someone's daily life. Now, impossibly, he was getting a version of it back. Gwenllian, the old woman from last night, appeared at the barn's entrance, lantern in hand despite the morning light. Might I have a word? Gwenllian stepped outside, grateful for the fresh air and the chance to assess their situation. In daylight, the village looked peaceful, small but prosperous, surrounded by terraced fields and protected by the mountain's embrace. Your vampire is causing quite a stir, the old woman said without preamble. Half the village wants to throw him a feast in gratitude. The other half wants to nail him in that barn until sunset out of caution. And you? Gwenllian asked carefully. I think the truth likely lies between those extremes, as it usually does. The woman studied Gwenllian with sharp eyes. You're a healer. Tell me honestly, can you love something that feeds on blood? Can you build a life with someone who'll never age while you and your daughter grow old and die? The bluntness should have been offensive. Instead, Gwenllian found it refreshing, direct questions, deserving direct answers. I don't know yet, she admitted. But I think I want to try. He's not what I expected a vampire to be. He's wounded, lonely, desperate to be good despite the curse forcing him toward darkness. She met the old woman's gaze. And he looks at Irelys like she's precious, like she matters. I can't. Ignore that. No, I suppose you can't. The old woman was quiet for a moment. Your daughter called him daddy that first night, didn't she? That's what the mountain whispers say. Gwenllian's breath caught. How did you? The mountain sees. The mountain remembers. The old magic that cursed him also connects him to this place in ways most don't understand. The woman's expression softened. He lost a daughter once. Did he tell you? He did. Then you understand what it means that he's letting your Irelies close. That's not cruelty or manipulation. That's a broken heart trying desperately to heal. She reached out, pressing something into Gwenllian's hand, a small cloth bag that clinked with coins. Provisions. Payment for healing services we may need in the future. There's also information the northern territories where you plan to flee have contacts I've written down, if you still wish to go. Gwenllian looked at the bag, then back at the barn where she could hear Airlys's laughter and Emrys's low response. And if we wish to stay, then you'll need to understand what that means. The old woman's voice grew serious. The curse that binds him to these mountains is old, powerful. It can be modified, eased, made more bearable through bonds willingly formed. You mean through blood, Gwenllian said quietly. I mean, through choice, through connection, through love, if you're brave enough to name it that. The woman glanced toward the barn. Regular feeding from a willing source, someone who offers blood freely, who maintains the bond can strengthen a cursed vampire. Let them walk longer in sunlight, make their humanity more accessible. But it requires commitment, trust, the kind of intimacy most mortals can't sustain with something immortal. Gwenllian's mind raced through implications. You're saying I could help him, make the curse less severe. I'm saying you already are. That's why he carried your scent of healing herbs when he came to the village edge last night. Why the mountain's magic recognized a bond forming. The old woman smiled. But it's not a small thing I'm suggesting. To become a vampire's chosen source is to tie your life to theirs in ways that transcend simple alliance. You'd be partners in truth, your mortality feeding his immortality, his power protecting your fragility. It's beautiful and terrible together. And dangerous, Gwenllian added. All worthwhile things are. The woman turned to leave, then paused. Talk to him. Truly talk. He's spent 600 years hiding what he needs. Make him speak it aloud. Only then can you decide if you're willing to provide it. She left Gwenllian standing in the morning light, mind churning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. Inside the barn, Airlys's story had apparently concluded, because the child's voice rose in a new question. Mr. Emrys, will you be my daddy? Gwenllian froze, breath stopping. Silence stretched long enough to ache. Then, Emrys's voice emerged rough with emotion barely contained. Little star, that's a very serious question. I know. Mama says serious questions deserve serious answers. Airlys's tone carried absolute certainty. My first daddy died. I don't remember him much. But you protect us. You tell me stories. You make Mama smile. That seems like daddy things. Airlys, Gwenllian started to interrupt, to save Emrys from this impossible situation. But he spoke first, voice shaking. I would be honored beyond measure to be your daddy. If your mama agrees. If she thinks a cursed vampire can be trusted with something so precious. Gwenllian stepped into the barn, finding them both Airlys sitting cross-legged near the shadowed corner where Emrys sheltered, the vampire's crimson eyes glowing bright with unshed tears. Mama? Airlys looked up hopefully. Can he be my daddy? Please? How did you answer that? How did you tell your 5-year-old daughter that yes, the immortal blood-drinking Lord of the Mountain could become her father because your heart had already decided? Fear and logic be damned? Gwenllian knelt beside Airlys, gathering her close, then extended her hand toward Emrys. He took it immediately, fingers trembling slightly against hers. If we do this, Gwenllian said quietly, we do it properly. No more hiding. No more pretending we're anything less than family. Family. Emrys breathed the word like prayer. Gwenllian, I'm not. You're enough, she interrupted firmly. Flawed, cursed, impossible, and enough. If you want this, if you want us. Want you? His laugh emerged broken. I've wanted nothing else since the moment Airlys called me daddy, and I remembered what it felt like to be chosen, to matter, to be more than just survival and shadow. Then yes, Gwenllian squeezed his hand. Yes, you can be her daddy. Our family, whatever that looks like with a vampire involved. Airlys squealed and launched herself at Emrys, who caught her. Automatically, pulling her into the shelter's shadow, where he could hold her without risking exposure to filtered sunlight. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you both. I will not fail you. I swear it on whatever remains of my soul. You already haven't failed us," Gwenllian said softly. "You've protected us, been honest with us, let us see your vulnerability. That's not failure, that's courage." They sat together in that dim barn while morning, aged toward noon, unlikely family forged from desperation and choice and stubborn hope. Outside, the village went about its business. Inside, 3 hearts beat, 2 mortal, 1 impossibly slow, in rhythm that felt like beginning. Eventually, Aerles fell asleep against Emrys's chest, exhausted by emotion and early waking. He held her with such careful reverence that Gwenllian's throat tightened. "I meant what I said," Emrys murmured, voice pitched low, to avoid waking the child. "About not failing you. But Gwenllian, there are things you need to understand. About what it means to bind yourself to someone like me." "I know some of it already," she replied. The village elder explained about blood bonds, about how regular feeding from a willing source can strengthen you, make the curse more bearable. His expression shifted to surprise, then wariness. And I want to understand it better. Want to know what you truly need, not just what you're willing to take." She met his gaze steadily. "So tell me, everything. What would it mean to become your chosen source?" Emrys was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing words. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 6 centuries' contemplation. "It would mean connection deeper than marriage, deeper than blood relation. The bond between vampire and willing source creates a resonance. I would know when you were afraid, hurt, endangered. You would feel my hunger, my need, my emotions in ways that transcend normal empathy." "That sounds invasive," Gwenllian said honestly. "It can be, which is why it requires absolute consent, absolute trust." His free hand, the one not holding Aerles, curled into a fist. "And it would mean regular feeding. Not every day, but perhaps twice weekly. Enough to maintain the bond's strength, to give me power to protect you properly. How much blood? Not enough to weaken you significantly. A mouthful or 2, as I said before. But the regularity matters, the consistency. It tells the curse that I am sustained, protected, less likely to lose control and become what I fear most." Gwenllian processed this clinically, healer's mind cataloging implications. "And the benefits to you, beyond not starving? I would be stronger, faster, more able to withstand daylight, perhaps several hours instead of 1. My connection to the mountain's magic would deepen, letting me protect larger areas, maintain wards that would keep even determined hunters at bay." He paused, "And I would feel human, more human. The bond would anchor me to mortality in ways that prevent descent into true monstrosity. So, I would essentially become your tether to humanity. Yes. Flat, honest. It's a terrible burden to ask someone to carry." "Is it?" Gwenllian challenged. "Or is it simply another form of partnership? I anchor you to humanity. You protect me from dangers I can't face alone. We both give, we both receive." "You make it sound simple." "I don't think it's simple at all. I think it's complicated and scary and probably the most dangerous decision I've ever considered." She reached out, careful not to disturb Aerles, and touched his face. "But I also think I'm going to do it anyway. Because you matter, Emrys. And if I can help make your existence less painful, why wouldn't I? Because you deserve more than to be sustenance for a monster. Stop calling yourself that." Her voice firmed with healer's authority. "You're not a monster. You're a person suffering from a magical affliction. There's a difference, and I need you to start recognizing it." Emrys stared at her, something like wonder blooming across his features. "You truly believe that?" "I do. And someday, I hope you will too." She settled back, mind made up. "So here's what we're going to do. We'll stay here for a few days, let Aerles rest and recover from the journey. During that time, you'll feed from me regularly, establish the bond properly. Then we'll decide together where to build our life. Maybe we stay near this village. Maybe we find somewhere more isolated. But we decide together. You're sure?" Vulnerability made his voice young despite centuries. "Once the bond forms, it becomes difficult to break. Not impossible, but painful for both parties. I don't want to trap you." "You're not trapping me. I'm choosing you." Gwenllian smiled, feeling certainty settle warm in her chest. All of you. Curse and all. That's what love is, isn't it? Choosing someone even when it's complicated? Love. He tested the word carefully, as though it might shatter. Gwenllian, I don't know if I'm capable anymore. The curse took so much. The curse took your mortality, not your heart. She leaned forward, pressing a kiss to his forehead. And I've felt your heart, Emrys. In your blood, in your actions, in the way you weep for what you've lost. It's still there, still beating, even if slower than it should. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starved for gentleness. If we do this, if we truly become family, I will do everything in my power to be worthy of it. You already are, Gwenllian whispered. You just need to believe it. Outside, noon sun reached its peak. Inside, in shadow and safety, 3 souls rested together, vampire, healer, and child, building something unprecedented from ruins and moonlight, and the stubborn conviction that love could transcend even death's curse. The bond wasn't formed yet. The future remained uncertain, but the choice had been made. And that, Gwenllian thought as sleep began to claim her too, was the most important part. Tomorrow they would begin the work of building a life together. Tonight, they would rest in the knowledge that none of them were alone anymore. And that made every complication, every danger, every impossible challenge ahead worth facing. Because they would face it together, always together. Chapter 7. The Binding. Night fell like a blessing, darkness rising from the valleys to reclaim what daylight had temporarily stolen. Emrys emerged from his shelter as Earlys slept, moving with renewed vitality now that the sun's threat had passed. Will it hurt? Gwenllian asked, settling herself on the blanket she'd arranged for precisely this purpose. Establishing the bond properly, I mean. You said the first time was just introduction, but this is different. It may be intense, Emrys admitted, kneeling before her. Moonlight streamed through the barn's gaps, painting silver across his features. The initial bond formation requires more blood, more time, more connection than simple feeding. I need to mark you. Claim you as mine in the way the curse understands. Mark me how? A scar. Small, usually placed where it can be easily hidden or displayed as the bonded chooses. His gaze dropped to her wrist, the same place he'd fed before. The puncture wounds will heal differently this time. Leave a pattern the curse recognizes. Silver crescents that identify you as willingly bound. Gwenllian examined her wrist, imagining the marks. Will they hurt? After? No. Most bonded describe them as warm, comforting even. A reminder of connection rather than wound. He hesitated. But there's no shame in changing your mind. We could continue as we are, irregular feeding, weaker bond. It would be enough. But would it be what you need? Gwenllian challenged gently. His silence was answer enough. Then we do this properly. She extended her wrist, steadying her, breathing. Walk me through it. What should I expect? Emrys cradled her hand with exquisite care, his thumb tracing patterns over her pulse point. First, I'll feed as I did before. Then, when the connection opens between us, I'll push deeper. Let you feel not just emotions but memories. Thoughts, the full weight of what I am and what the bond means. And me? Gwenllian asked. What will you feel from me? Everything. The word emerged rough. Your hopes, fears, the love you carry for Earlys. Any doubts about this choice? The bond cannot exist on deception, Gwenllian. If you harbor reservations you haven't voiced, I will know. And if those reservations are too strong, the bond may not take it all. I understand. She did, and the honesty of it felt like its own kind of courage. I'm ready. Then we begin. He lowered his mouth to her wrist, and the sting came exactly as before, sharp, bright, then fading into warm numbness. But this time, when the pull began, it didn't stop at surface sensation. Gwenllian gasped as images flooded her awareness, not her own memories but his, cascading through their joined blood like a river finding its course. A great hall filled with firelight and music, before the curse, when he'd been simply Emrys, the mortal lord, young and idealistic and desperately trying to prove himself worthy of his father's legacy. A small girl with dark curls laughing as he swung her in circles, calling him Dada with absolute trust and love. Katrin, his daughter, before plague had forced impossible choices. The creature offering the bargain ancient beyond reckoning, made of shadow and necessity, speaking words that would damn and save in equal measure. Waking to hunger so vast it drowned everything else, The first terrible understanding that he was no longer human, no longer safe, no longer capable of the life he'd known. Centuries of isolation, watching from darkness as generations lived and died. As the world changed and he remained locked, in immortal stasis, as loneliness carved hollows into his spirit deeper than any physical wound. And then, impossibly, Airlies's voice in ruined halls, calling him daddy, breaking 600 years of careful distance with one innocent question. The memories threatened to overwhelm, but beneath them, Gwenllian felt something else. His desperate hope that she meant what she'd promised, his terror that he would fail her the way he'd failed others, his bone-deep conviction that he loved her already despite knowing her for mere days. "I love you too," she whispered, without meaning to speak aloud, the words pulled from her by the connection's intensity. Emrys froze, mouth still against her wrist. Then, carefully, he pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "You cannot know that yet," he said, voice shaking. "Not truly. Not after only I can know my own heart." Gwenllian reached up with her free hand, cupping his face. "I've spent 3 years running, surviving, too afraid to let anyone close. And then you appeared impossible and dangerous and honest about both those things. You didn't hide what you are, didn't pretend the curse was anything less than terrible. But you also protected us, chose us, let us see your vulnerability." She smiled despite tears gathering in her eyes. "That's not simple gratitude or convenience, Emrys. That's love. Maybe sudden, maybe complicated, but real." "Gwenllian." Her name broke on his lips. "Finish it," she urged. "Complete the bond. Let me in the way I'm letting you in. No more barriers. No more hiding." He searched her face for a long moment, clearly seeking some sign of doubt or fear. Finding none, he lowered his mouth back to her wrist. This time, when the pull came, Gwenllian pushed back, opened herself fully to the connection, and let him see. The grief of losing her husband, learning to be both mother and father to an infant while fighting exhaustion and despair. The determination that had driven her healing studies, the conviction that understanding the body's mysteries could prevent others from suffering similar loss. Years of careful survival, building a practice, creating safety for Airlies, always aware of how fragile their position as a widow and child alone. The horror of discovering Cadoc's poison, the moral certainty that some lines could not be crossed regardless of consequence. And these past 3 days, fear transformed into fascination, fascination deepening into trust, trust blossoming into something that felt dangerously like destiny. The absolute conviction that Emrys mattered, that his suffering could be eased, that choosing him was the bravest and rightest thing she'd ever done. The connection blazed between them, complete, honest, terrifyingly intimate. Gwenllian felt the exact moment the bond locked into place. Warmth flooding through her veins, Emrys's presence settling into her awareness like a second heartbeat. The sensation of being known utterly and accepted completely. He pulled back, carefully licking the wounds closed, and Gwenllian watched silver light shimmer across her wrist as the marks healed into delicate crescents. Beautiful, permanent, unmistakable. "It's done," Emrys breathed, and she heard wonder and terror mixed in his voice. "You're mine now, bonded, connected in ways that transcend normal." "And you're mine," Gwenllian interrupted firmly. "That's what partnership means, Emrys. Mutual claiming, equal choosing." He stared at her, then at their hands still joined, then back at her face as though seeing her for the first time. "I can feel you," he whispered. "Your heartbeat, your warmth, the love you carry for Airlies like sunlight in your chest. It's..." He stopped, clearly struggling for words. "It's the most beautiful thing I've experienced in 600 years. "Good." Gwenllian shifted closer, until they were nearly touching. "Because you're stuck with it now. Stuck with us. Stuck with messy mortal feelings and a 5-year-old who's already decided you're her father and a healer who's going to insist you take better care of yourself." "I don't know how to do this," Emrys admitted, vulnerability naked in his expression. "How to be part of a family again. How to trust that I won't ruin everything through simple existence. Then we'll learn together. That's what I keep telling you." Gwenllian brought his hand to her lips, kissing his knuckles in deliberate echo of his courtly gesture. "One day at a time. One choice at a time. And whenever you forget that you're worthy of this, I'll remind you. You'll have to remind me often. I know. I'm prepared for that." A sound from Saren's sleeping form made them both turn. The child stirred, blinking sleepily in the moonlight, then smiled when she saw them together. "Did it work?" she asked, voice muzzy with interrupted dreams. Are you bonded now, like Mama explained? Yes, little star, Emery's confirmed gently. We're bonded now. Your mother and I are connected. Permanently. Good. Saren sat up, rubbing her eyes. Does that mean we're really truly a family? All three of us? Gwenllian glanced at Emrys, saw her own emotions reflected in his crimson gaze, hope and fear and determination all tangled together. Yes, she said firmly. All three of us. Really, truly. Saren scrambled over to them, inserting herself between vampire and healer with a child's easy assumption of belonging. She took one of Emrys's hands and one of Gwenllian's, linking them all together. Then we should make promises, she announced with absolute seriousness. Families make promises to each other. That's what Mama told me about her and my first daddy. What kind of promises? Emrys asked, voice suspiciously thick. Important ones, like... Saren thought hard, violet eyes scrunched in concentration, like promising to stay together even when things are scary, and promising to tell the truth even when it's hard, and promising to love each other no matter what. Those are very good promises, Gwenllian managed around the lump in her throat. Do you want to go first? Okay. Saren straightened, taking her role seriously. I promise to be brave like Mama and kind like you, Mr. Emrys, and I promise to love you both forever and ever, even when I'm grown up and old like the village lady. That's a beautiful promise, darling, Gwenllian said softly. Then she turned to Emrys, meeting his gaze. I promise to be honest with you about what I need and what I fear. I promise to help carry your curse's weight, so you never have to bear it alone again. And I promise to love you both, the man you were and the immortal you've become, for as long as I draw breath and beyond if the bond allows. Silence filled the barn, heavy with emotion. Emrys's free hand trembled slightly where it rested in Saren's grip. He stopped, started again, voice breaking. I promise to protect you both with everything I am and everything I have. I promise to be worthy of the bore, trust you've placed in this cursed creature. I promise to try desperately, constantly to be the father Saren deserves and the partner Gwenllian needs. Tears gathered in his eyes, spilling over to trace silver paths down his pale cheeks. And I promise to love you. Both of you. Even though I'm terrified of failing, even though I don't know how to do this anymore, even though 600 years have taught me that everything I love eventually turns to ash and memory. It won't this time, Saren said with a child's absolute conviction. Because we're all choosing together. That makes it different. From the mouths of innocence, Gwenllian murmured, pulling them both close. She's right, you know. We're all choosing. Every day, we'll keep choosing. That's what makes this work. They sat together in that barn while moonlight streamed through broken boards and the night sang its ancient songs. The bond thrummed between Gwenllian and Emrys, new and strange and already precious. A living connection that promised both of them would never be truly alone again. What happens now? Emrys asked eventually. Tomorrow and the days after? Do we stay here? Travel north? I can protect you anywhere, but you deserve a true home, not constant running, I think. Gwenllian paused, considering. I think we rebuild your manor, make it whole again. It's protected, warded, and already connected to the mountain's magic. Plus, the village knows you, respects what you've done for them. We could have community there, safety, a real life. Rebuild the manor. Emrys tested the idea, clearly surprised. I never considered. It's been in ruins for so long. I assumed it would remain a tomb. It was a tomb when you were alone and grieving, Gwenllian countered. But you're not alone anymore. We could make it a home instead. Fill it with life and laughter and the sound of Saren's footsteps in halls that have been silent too long. I want to live in a castle, Saren bounced, excitedly. Can I have a room with a big window? And can we have a garden? We can have whatever we want, Emrys said, and wonder colored his voice. The manor's bones are still sound. The wards remain strong. With time and effort, he trailed off, then laughed, genuine, disbelieving, joyful. We could actually do this. Build a life there, together, Gwenllian agreed, squeezing his hand. Though we'll need to be practical. I'll need to establish a healing practice both for income and because sitting idle will drive me mad. And Saren needs education, socialization with other children. The village has a school, Emrys interrupted. Knowledge from decades of observation flowing freely now that he had reason to share it. Basic letters and numbers, taught by the blacksmith's wife. She's patient, kind. Saren would do well there. And my healing practice? These mountains have needed a resident healer for years. The nearest physician is 3 days' travel. If you're willing to serve the village. He met her gaze steadily. They would welcome you, especially knowing you're bonded to their mountain lord. It would ease fears, build trust between mortal and immortal. You've thought about this, Gwenllian observed. I've had centuries to think about how things could be if I weren't alone. I just never believed. His voice roughened. I never believed anyone would actually choose to stay. Well, we are staying, so you'd better get used to it. Gwenllian stood, pulling him up with her. But for tonight, we rest. Tomorrow we can start planning logistics, figure out supplies, timeline, what needs to happen first. Tomorrow, Emery's echoed, and the word sounded like promise. They settled back into their makeshift beds, Saren curled between Gwenllian and Emery's, one small hand on each of them as though ensuring they wouldn't disappear. Gwenllian felt the bond humming contentedly in her chest, warm and alive, connecting her to the immortal presence at her daughter's other side. Gwenllian? Emery's voice came soft through the darkness. Yes? Thank you. For choosing me. For seeing past the curse. For offering hope I'd forgotten how to hold. Thank you for letting us in, she replied. For being brave enough to try again after 600 years of isolation. That takes more courage than I think you realize. We'll make mistakes, he warned. I'm certain of it. I'll be overprotective, or withdraw when I should lean in, or forget how to communicate like humans do. And I'll be stubborn and independent to a fault, and insist on treating your curse like a medical condition I can diagnose and manage. Gwenllian interrupted with a smile. We'll be imperfect, but we'll be imperfect together. That's what matters. Silence settled comfortable now, rather than oppressive. Through the bond, Gwenllian felt Emery's emotions gradually settling into something that might have been peace. I love you, he whispered, testing the words like a man relearning a forgotten language. I know I said it in the bond, but I want to say it aloud, in words you can hear. I love you, Gwenllian. Both of you. More than I thought this cursed heart could still feel. I love you too, Gwenllian replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Now sleep, or rest, or whatever it is vampires do when they're not keeping watch. Tomorrow we start building our impossible family. Tonight, just be here. With us, that's enough. It's more than enough, Emery's breathed. It's everything. Outside, the moon continued its arc across the sky. In the village below, light slowly extinguished as honest folk found their rest. And in a simple barn at the mountain's edge, 3 souls lay tangled together, immortal and mortal, cursed and choosing, bound by blood and promise and love that transcended every reasonable objection. The future remained uncertain. Rebuilding the manor would take months. Establishing their family in the village's eyes would require patience and proof. The curse wasn't broken, wouldn't be broken, would remain a constant shadow over their lives. But shadows couldn't exist without light, and Gwenllian had just become Emery's light, freely chosen, willingly given, burning bright enough to illuminate 6 centuries of accumulated darkness. Tomorrow they would begin the work of building a life from ruins. Tonight, they rested in the knowledge that love, stubborn, impossible, transformative love, had already won. Chapter 8. First Dawn. The decision to return to the manor came naturally, discussed over breakfast as morning light crept across the village. The old woman whose name, Gwenllian learned, was Marge provided maps, advice, and a knowing smile when Saren announced they were going to make Daddy's castle beautiful again. The mountain will be glad to have its lord back properly, Marge said, pressing supplies into Gwenllian's hands. And will be glad to have a healer so close. The arrangement benefits everyone. They left the village as the sun climbed higher, Emery's wrapped in heavy cloaks and staying to shadows while Gwenllian and Saren walked in daylight. The bond thrummed between healer and vampire, a constant awareness of each other's presence that felt both strange and comforting. Does it bother you? Emery's asked as they climbed the mountain path. Feeling me always there in the back of your mind? Not as much as I expected, Gwenllian admitted. Through the bond, she felt his surprise at her honesty. It's like knowing someone's in the next room, present but not intrusive. Does it bother you? No, it's... He paused, searching for words. It's like remembering how to breathe after centuries of holding my breath. Natural, necessary, right. They reached the manor as afternoon aged toward evening, the ruins looking somehow less desolate now that they approached with purpose rather than desperation. Emery's moved through the halls with new energy, pointing out where walls could be rebuilt, which rooms remained structurally sound, how the ancient wards could be reinforced. The eastern wing is most intact, he explained, leading them through corridors Gwenllian recognized from their first night. We could start there, make it livable before expanding to the rest. How long will it take? Gwenllian asked, her practical mind already cataloging challenges. Months, certainly. Perhaps a year to make it truly comfortable. He ran his hand along a stone wall, and Gwenllian felt affection flowing through the bond. His connection to this place ran deeper than simple ownership. But we have time. For the first time in 600 years, I have time that doesn't feel like a curse. Saren had run ahead, exploring with a child's fearless enthusiasm. Her voice echoed back through the halls. Mama, come see. There's a room with stars painted on the ceiling. They followed her call to a chamber that must have been magnificent once circular, with a domed ceiling where faded constellations still glimmered in gold leaf. Moonlight would stream through the tall windows when darkness fell. Gwenllian realized it would be perfect for Saren. This was Katrin's room, Emery said quietly. And through the bond, Gwenllian felt the knife edge of old grief. I painted those stars for her. She loved astronomy, wanted to learn every constellation's name and story. Can it be my room? Saren asked, then paused, sensitivity beyond her years showing through. Or would that make you too sad? Emery's knelt before her, taking her small hands in his. It would make me happy beyond words, little star. Nothing would honor Katrin's memory better than filling this room with laughter again. Then I'll learn all the constellations too, Saren promised solemnly. So I can tell her about them, in case she's watching from wherever people go when they die. Emery's pulled her into a fierce embrace, and Gwenllian felt his emotions crash through the bond grief and bond. Gratitude and love all tangled together so intensely she had to steady herself against the wall. Careful, she murmured. The bond carries feelings both ways, remember? You're broadcasting pretty loudly right now. He looked up, control reasserting itself. Sorry. I'm still learning to modulate. Don't apologize. I'm glad I can feel this. Glad I can understand how much she means to you. Gwenllian moved to join them, completing the circle. Both of them. Your first daughter and your new one. Our daughter, Emery's corrected softly. She's ours now, isn't she? That's what the promises meant. Ours, Gwenllian agreed, and the word felt like sealing a pact. They spent the remaining daylight hours planning. Emery's knew which sections of the manor remained structurally sound, where water sources could be tapped, how to work with the mountain's natural magic to reinforce walls and wards. Gwenllian contributed practical knowledge, what a household needed for basic function, how to make spaces livable with limited resources. When darkness fell, Emery's emerged fully from his protective layers, moving with the predatory grace that came naturally to him in moonlight. He built up the fire in the great hall, one of the few rooms with an intact roof and functional fireplace, while Gwenllian prepared the simple meal they'd brought from the village. We'll need to hunt, Emery said, watching Gwenllian work with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Not just for my needs. Saren requires protein, and our supplies won't last long. Can you teach me? The question emerged before Gwenllian could second-guess it. I know basic trapping, but actual hunting tracking? Stalking I've never learned. Interest flickered across his features. You want me to teach you to hunt? I want to be useful, self-sufficient. If we're building a life here, I should know how to contribute to all aspects of it. She met his gaze steadily. Plus, it would give us time together. Help me. Understand how you move, how you perceive the world. That seems important for someone bonded to a vampire. You're not afraid of becoming too much like me? Are you afraid of becoming too much like me? Gwenllian challenged. Terrified, he admitted. Your humanity feels so bright through the bond. I'm afraid I'll corrupt it, dim it, turn something beautiful into something shadowed. That's not how light works, Emery's. It doesn't dim when touched by shadow, it illuminates the darkness. She reached across the space between them, finding his hand. We affect each other. That's what the bond means. But influence isn't corruption. It's just growth, change, becoming more than we were separately. He stared at their joined hands, thumb tracing the silver crescents on her wrist. You're very wise for someone so young. I'm 32, not exactly a girl. I'm 627. Everyone is young to me. His smile held warmth despite its self-deprecation. But you're right. About the bond, about growth, about facing changes together. He stood, pulling her up with him. Tomorrow night then, I'll teach you to hunt. Tonight. He glanced at Saren, already drowsing by the fire. Tonight we make sure our daughter rests comfortably in her new home. They settled Saren in the room with stars on the ceiling, layering blankets to compensate for the manor's chill. Gwenllian sat beside her daughter until sleep claimed the child completely, then returned to the great hall where Emrys waited. She's happy, Gwenllian said, settling beside him near the fire. I can't remember the last time I saw her this settled, this safe. She hasn't had stability in a long time, has she? Not since her father died. We've been running in one way or another ever since, first from poverty, then from Kadok's wrath. Gwenllian leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solidity of him. This is the first place that's felt like it could be home. Then, we'll make it. 1. Emrys wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. Whatever it takes, however long it requires, we'll build something lasting here. They sat in comfortable silence, watching flames dance across ancient stones. Through the bond, Gwenllian felt Emrys's contentment tentative and fragile, as though he feared it might shatter if acknowledged too directly. Can I ask you something? Gwenllian said eventually. Anything. The village elder Margid, she mentioned that blood bonds between vampires and mortals are rare, difficult to maintain over time. Why? Emrys was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing his response. Because mortality and immortality exist on fundamentally different timelines. The vampire lives forever, unchanging. The mortal ages, weakens, eventually dies. The bond makes that contrast painfully, intimately clear. You'll have to watch me grow old, Gwenllian said, understanding dawning. Watch Saren grow old. Watch us die while you remain frozen at whatever age the curse claimed you. Yes. The word emerged flat. Every bonded vampire I've known has spoken of it. The agony of feeling a beloved presence fade through the bond year by year, knowing that separation is inevitable and eternal. And yet you still chose to bond with me. Because 30 or 40 or 50 years of shared life seemed better than 600 more years alone. His arm tightened around her. Even knowing the ending, even knowing the pain it will cause, I chose you. Chose this. Chose the possibility of love over the certainty of isolation. Gwenllian absorbed this, her mind working through implications. Is there any way to change that? To extend my lifespan? Or no? Immediate. Absolute. The curse can only be given, never shared. To make you immortal would require you to die and be reborn as I was empty, hungry, damned. I would never condemn you to that existence. What about Saren? When she grows up? If she wanted— No, Emrys repeated, even more firmly. I will love her, protect her, be her father in every way that matters. But I will not curse her, not even if she begs me, not even if it means losing her eventually. His voice roughened with emotion. Some prices are too high, even for immortality. Good. Gwenllian twisted to look at him directly. I wouldn't want you to. I just needed to know you'd already thought it through. Made that decision. 600 years teaches thorough consideration of consequences, he said dryly. Then more seriously. Does it frighten you, knowing how this ends? Yes, Gwenllian admitted, but not enough to make me regret choosing you. I'd rather have decades of joy followed by grief than a lifetime of safety that never risks love. You say that now, when aging is still distant, when death feels theoretical. His expression turned bleak. But the bond will force you to feel my suffering as you weaken. Every ache, every illness, every step toward death, I'll experience it through. Our connection. It will be torture for us both. Then we'll face that torture together when it comes, Gwenllian said firmly. Right now in this moment, we're both here. Both alive in our own ways. Both choosing each other despite knowing the challenges ahead. Can't that be enough? You make it sound simple. It's not simple at all. It's probably the hardest thing either of us will ever do. She cupped his face, making him meet her eyes. But I think we're both strong enough to do hard things, especially together. He searched her expression for a long moment, clearly seeking doubt or fear. Finding only determination, he leaned forward and kissed her, gentle, tentative, asking permission even as he took it. Gwenllian responded immediately, deepening the kiss, tasting the faint copper of blood on his lips and finding it didn't revolt her the way it should have. Through the bond, she felt his surprise, his pleasure, his desperate need to be close to someone after centuries of enforced distance. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Gwenllian was. Emrys didn't need to breathe but seemed to be doing it anyway out of habit or sympathy. She pressed her forehead to his. "We're going to be all right," she whispered. "All three of us. I know it. I want to believe that," Emrys replied, voice raw. "Then believe it. Have faith in us. In this." She kissed him again, brief and sweet. "I have enough faith for both of us right now. Eventually you'll catch up. Confident in your powers of persuasion, healer? Confident in love's power to transform impossible situations into bearable ones." She settled back against his shoulder, watching firelight paint gold across ancient stones. "Now tell me about the manor. How it was when you were mortal. I want to know what we're rebuilding toward." So he told her stories, flowing more freely now that the bond had opened pathways between them. He described grand feasts in this very hall, his father's booming laugh echoing off high ceilings, his mother's gentle presence bringing grace to rough mountain life. He spoke of Katrin learning to walk on these floors, of teaching her astronomy in the tower that had since collapsed, of the simple, profound joy of being part of something larger than himself. Gwenllian listened, painting mental pictures of the manor as it had been, already planning how they might restore at least echoes of that former glory. "It won't be exactly the same," she warned. "We don't have the resources for true grandeur, but we can make it beautiful again, make it feel like a place worth protecting." "It already feels that way," Emrys said softly. "Because you and Saren are here. You've transformed 600 years of tomb into home in the space of 3 days. That's magic no curse can counter." "Not magic, just love." Gwenllian smiled. "And stubbornness. Lots of stubbornness. A deadly combination." He agreed, and she heard affection warming his voice. They sat together until the fire burned low, speaking of plans and dreams and the careful logistics of building a life from ruins. Eventually, Gwenllian's eyes began to drift closed, despite her determination to stay awake, to spend every possible moment soaking in this new, fragile happiness. "Sleep," Emrys urged, shifting to make her more comfortable. "I'll keep watch. Ensure nothing disturbs your rest." "You need rest too," Gwenllian mumbled, already half dreaming. "I don't sleep as mortals do. A few hours of meditation at most." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Spending those hours watching over you and Saren is no hardship. Rather the opposite." "Stubborn vampire," she murmured affectionately. "Stubborn healer," he replied with equal warmth. Gwenllian let sleep claim her, secure in the knowledge that ancient eyes watched over her safety, that the bond would alert her if anything threatened, that for the first time in years, she could rest without fear's constant companion. Through the bond, just before consciousness faded completely, she felt Emrys's emotions settle into something profound and peaceful. The contentment of a purpose finally found, a life finally worth living, a heart finally allowed to feel again after 6 centuries frozen in immortal stasis. Tomorrow would bring work, challenges, the slow labor of transforming ruins into refuge. Tonight brought rest, warmth, the simple miracle of not being alone. And that, Gwenllian thought as dreams rose to claim her, was more than enough. Chapter 9. Blood and Belonging. The days that followed fell into patterns both strange and comforting. Gwenllian woke with dawn, attending to Saren's needs and the practical matters of establishing a household in partially ruined halls. Emrys retreated to darkness during sunlight hours but remained present through the bond, a constant awareness that both guided and reassured. When night fell, he emerged transformed, vital and powerful, ready to tackle the physical labor of restoration. Together they cleared debris, reinforced walls, slowly coaxing the manor back toward livability. And twice weekly, in the privacy of their shared chamber, Gwenllian offered blood to maintain the bond. The feeding ritual became almost meditative, comfortable intimacy rather than awkward necessity. Emrys would settle beside her, taking her wrist or occasionally her throat, which she'd learned to prefer despite its vulnerability. The connection felt stronger, more immediate, and the exchange would open pathways between them that transcended simple sustenance. "Your emotions are easier to read today," Emrys observed one evening as he carefully closed the punctures at her throat. "Something happened?" "The village sent a delegation," Gwenllian admitted, still processing the afternoon's events. "Marged and the blacksmith's wife. They asked if I'd be willing to provide healing services officially this time, not just emergency care. They'll pay in supplies, labor for, the manor's restoration, anything we need. You said yes. Not a question. He'd felt her decision through the bond. I said I'd need to establish a proper workspace first. Make sure I had the tools and herbs necessary. She touched the fresh marks on her throat, feeling the warmth that always followed feeding. They're already planning to help build me a still room in the manor's south wing. You're integrating us into the community, Emery said slowly. Creating connections beyond just our family unit. Is that all right? I know you've spent centuries avoiding. It's more than all right. He pulled her close, and through the bond Gwenllian felt his wonder. You're teaching me how to live again. Not just survive, but actually participate in the world. Build something larger than isolation. We're teaching each other, Gwenllian corrected. You've taught me that protection doesn't require control. That strength can be gentle. That immortal doesn't mean inhuman. Sweet healer. You see the best in everything, don't you? I see what's actually there. You're the one who keeps insisting you're a monster, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. He laughed, a sound that was becoming more frequent, more genuine. What did I do to deserve you? You suffered for 600 years until you were ready to accept help. That seems like earning it the hard way. She shifted in his arms, getting comfortable. Speaking of which, tomorrow's the full moon. You said moonlight helps heal the curse's damage. Should we make sure you get proper exposure? Emery's tensed slightly. The full moon strengthens all vampires, makes the hunger more intense, control more difficult. I usually isolate myself completely during that time to avoid complications. But you're fed regularly now. The bond keeps you anchored. Gwenllian turned to face him. Maybe it would be different this time. Maybe you could actually enjoy the moon's gift instead of fearing what it might unleash. Gwenllian, if I lose control, you won't. I trust you. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling the slow, steady beat beneath cold skin. And if the hunger does become overwhelming, I'm here. I can provide what you need. I don't want to hurt you. You won't. The bond would stop you. I felt how it works during the last feeding. The moment my distress would spike, your instincts would pull back automatically. It's a built-in safeguard, she smiled. One of the curse's few mercies, according to the lore Marge shared. He studied her face, clearly weighing risk against possibility. You're certain? I'm certain I want to see you in full moonlight without fear. I'm certain that part of healing your relationship with the curse means not hiding from the moon's influence. She squeezed his hand. Let me help you with this, please. His resistance crumbled. Gwenllian felt it through the bond like walls coming down. You're going to insist on healing all my wounds, aren't you? Even the self-inflicted ones. Especially those. They're the deepest. She kissed him softly. Tomorrow night, then. We'll go up to the tower, the one that's still intact. Let you bathe in moonlight properly. See what happens. And if what happens is dangerous, then we'll handle it together, like everything else. The next evening brought clouds that parted just as the full moon rose, as though the universe itself conspired to Gwenllian's plans. She left Saren sleeping safely in her starred chamber with wards. Emery's had reinforced to the point of paranoia, and climbed to the tower with the vampire at her side. The view from the top stole her breath, mountains silhouetted against night sky. The village's lights scattered like fallen stars far below, and above it all the moon hung huge and silver, so bright it cast shadows. Emery stepped into the moonlight and transformed. His skin seemed to drink the silver light, absorbing it until he practically glowed. The crimson of his eyes deepened to wine-dark scarlet. Power radiated from him in waves that Gwenllian felt through both the bond and simple proximity. Ancient, vast, barely contained. How do you feel? She asked, keeping her voice steady despite the way his presence had become almost overwhelming. Alive. The word emerged rough, wondering. For the first time in decades, I feel genuinely alive. The moonlight is burning away damage I didn't even realize had accumulated. He turned to her, and his expression held awe mixed with hunger. It's incredible. And the hunger? Gwenllian asked carefully. Present. Growing. But not uncontrollable. He took a step toward her, movements fluid and predatory. You smell like life, Gwenllian. Like warmth and copper and salt. The moon makes every sense sharper, every desire more intense. Do you need to feed? She kept her voice calm, clinical, even as her pulse jumped. Yes, soon. His gaze fixed on her throat where the bond marks rested. But I can wait. I'm in control. The bond helps your presence grounds me, even as the moon calls to baser instincts. Then feed now. While the moonlight strengthens you, let me help you take full advantage of it. Emery's closed the distance between them in a movement too fast to track. His hands framed her face with exquisite gentleness despite the power thrumming through him. Are you certain? The feeding will be more intense under the full moon. The connection deeper. I want you willing, not just willing to help. I'm certain. Gwenllian tilted her head, exposing her throat. Take what you need. All of it. His pupils dilated at her surrender. All of it might be more than you expect. Then I'll learn to expect more. He struck swiftly, fangs sinking deep into the marks he'd left before, the familiar sting sharpening into something almost electric. Gwenllian gasped as the connection flooded open between them, amplified by moonlight until she could feel everything. His hunger vast and ancient and, finally being properly satisfied. His love newer, but no less powerful, tangled with protective instinct and desperate need. His power, the curse's full weight made bearable by her freely given gift. Strength flowing through him like fire through dry wood. And beneath it all, his humanity battered but unbroken, still fighting after 6 centuries to remain more than simple monster. Gwenllian's knees buckled. Emery's caught her easily, cradling her against his chest without breaking the seal of his mouth on her throat. The pull intensified, and she felt blood flowing from her veins into his, life-sustaining undeath in the way the bond demanded. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like completion, 2 halves of an impossible whole, finally fitting together properly. When Emrys finally pulled back, his eyes blazed with power and his skin had flushed with her blood, making him look almost human, almost alive. Are you all right? He asked immediately, supporting her, weight as strength slowly returned to her limbs. Gwenllian paused, taking inventory. Lightheaded but not dangerously so. Tired but pleasantly so, like after good physical labor. And through the bond, she truly felt him, every layer of what he was laid bare in the moonlight. I'm perfect. Are you? I'm better than I've been in centuries. He held her carefully, as though she might shatter. The moonlight and your blood together, it's like the curse is in remission. Like I'm almost mortal again. At least for tonight. Good. Gwenllian smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. Then enjoy it. Enjoy this moment without fear or guilt. You've earned it. They stood together in that high tower while the full moon traced its arc across the sky. Vampire and healer bound by choice and blood and love that transcended every reasonable objection. Emrys held her as she recovered from the feeding. His heartbeat stronger now. Faster. Almost normal. Providing rhythm to the night. Thank you, he murmured eventually. For insisting I stop hiding from the moon. For giving me this gift. Thank you for letting me help, Gwenllian replied. For trusting me enough to be vulnerable. Always, he promised. From now until your mortal life ends, I will trust you. Let you in. Be vulnerable if that's what you need from me. And after? The question emerged quietly. After my mortal life ends? What then? He was silent for a long moment, clearly considering. Then I will grieve. Properly. Honestly. Without the distance I maintained for Katrin. I will let it hurt in all the ways it's meant to. And when the grief finally eases. He tightened his arms around her. I will remember. Keep you alive in memory and story. Tell Saren's grandchildren about their brave grandmother who chose to love a monster and transformed him back into something approaching human. Tears gathered in Gwenllian's eyes. That's beautiful. It's all I can offer. Eternal love, trapped in mortal time frames. His voice roughened. I wish I could give you more. Give you forever instead of just decades. You're giving me everything that matters, Gwenllian assured him. Partnership, family, purpose. The knowledge that I'm seen and valued and loved completely. That's worth more than immortality could ever be. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. She smiled despite tears. Now let's go check on Saren. All this emotional intensity is making me want to hug our daughter. Our daughter, Emrys echoed, and wonder filled his voice every time he claimed that connection. They descended from the tower together, Emrys moving with renewed grace and strength while Gwenllian leaned on him for support. The feeding had taken more than usual, not dangerously so, but enough that her body needed time to recover. Saren was indeed still sleeping, curled peacefully among blankets in her starred chamber. They stood in the doorway watching her. the bond thrumming contentedly between them. "We're going to make this work," Gwenllian said softly. "Build a real life here. Give her stability and love, and a father who'll protect her fiercely." "I'll give her everything I have," Emrys promised. "Both of you. Whatever I am, whatever the curse allows, it's yours." "I know." Gwenllian squeezed his hand. "Now come on. I'm exhausted. You're overpowered from moon-enhanced feeding, and tomorrow we have a still room to begin planning. We should rest while we can." They settled in their own chamber, still sparse, still more function than comfort, but slowly becoming home through accumulated small touches. Gwenllian curled against Emrys's side, feeling the unusual warmth of him, her blood still heating his skin from within, and let contentment wash over her. "I love you," she murmured, already half asleep. "I love you too," Emrys replied, and through the bond she felt the absolute truth of it. Centuries of loneliness finally ending, hope finally daring to take root, love finally finding purchase in cursed soil. Outside, the full moon completed its journey across the sky. In the valley below, the village rested under ancient protection, and in a slowly healing manner, an impossible family slept together, vampire, healer, and child, building something unprecedented from ruins and moonlight and stubborn faith that love could transcend even death's curse. The future remained uncertain. Challenges would come. Gwenllian would age while Emrys remained frozen. Eventually, death would separate them despite the bond's protests. But that was tomorrow's grief. Tonight brought love, warmth, the miracle of choosing each other against all reasonable odds. And that was enough. It would always be enough. Chapter 10. Home. 6 months passed in a blur of work and wonder. The manor transformed under their combined efforts, Emrys's strength and the villagers' labor restoring walls, while Gwenllian's careful planning turned empty chambers into functional spaces. The still room became her pride, herbs drying from rafters, shelves lined with remedies, a sturdy table where she treated patients who climbed the mountain seeking her skill. Word had spread that the healer bonded to the mountain lord possessed both medical knowledge and supernatural protection, making her services uniquely valuable. Saren thrived, attending the village school during safe daylight hours and returning to the manor each evening with stories of lessons learned and friends made. She moved through both worlds easily, mortal child and vampire lord's daughter together, bridging communities through simple presence. "Mama, Daddy!" Saren's voice echoed through the hall one autumn evening. "Come see what I found." They found her in the library, another recently restored room, its shelves filling slowly with books purchased or borrowed from the village. She'd spread a large volume across the reading table, pointing excitedly at an illuminated page. "It's a map of the mountains, from before Daddy's curse. Look, there's our manor, and the village, and oh, there's a waterfall I didn't know about. Can we go see it?" Emrys leaned over her shoulder, examining the ancient cartography with interest. "The moonfall. It flows strongest during autumn, when mountain snows begin to melt. I haven't visited in," he paused, calculating. 200 years, perhaps? Can we go tomorrow?" Saren bounced with enthusiasm. "All 3 of us? Like a real family adventure?" "It's a full day's journey," Gwenllian warned, though she was already mentally preparing supplies. "We'd need to camp overnight." "I can carry supplies easily," Emrys offered. "And the area is safe, protected by the same wards that guard the manor. Nothing dangerous enters that territory without my knowledge. Please?" Saren employed her most effective weapon, wide violet eyes, and absolute conviction that the answer would be yes. Gwenllian laughed, exchanging glances with Emrys. Through the bond, she felt his matching desire to give Saren this simple joy, to create the kind of family memories that would anchor all of them to this new life. "All right," Gwenllian agreed. "Tomorrow we go see the moonfall. But you're responsible for packing your own supplies, young lady." Saren squealed and ran off to begin preparations immediately, leaving the adults alone in the library's quiet. "Thank you," Emrys said softly. "For what? For making this?" He gestured vaguely at the room, the manor, the life they'd built. "I never imagined I could have this again. Family, purpose, joy that isn't overshadowed by guilt or fear. You've made it too," Gwenllian reminded him, moving into his embrace. "You let us in. That's the hardest part." He kissed her, familiar now, comfortable, but still carrying that edge of wonder that came from centuries of isolation finally broken. Through the bond, Gwenllian felt his contentment, and beneath it, buried deep, the ever-present awareness that this was temporary, that her mortality ticked steadily forward while he remained frozen. "Don't," she murmured against his lips, Don't think about the ending. Not yet. We have years ahead of us. Decades. That's more than most people get of perfect happiness. Is it perfect? He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Even with the complications? Especially with the complications. They make it real. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Now come on. We should probably make sure Saren isn't packing her entire collection of rocks for tomorrow's trip. They found their daughter indeed attempting to include several choice geological specimens, and the evening dissolved into gentle arguments about necessity versus enthusiasm. Later, after Saren had been tucked into bed, a proper bed now, with a proper mattress and warm blankets, Gwenllian and Emery sat together in the chamber that had become theirs no longer bare, but furnished with small comforts acquired through trade, and, "I need to feed," Emery said quietly. "Before tomorrow's journey, I want to be at full strength for the trek." "Of course." Gwenllian settled beside him, tilting her head to expose her throat, her preferred feeding site, now marked permanently with silver crescents that had become as much a part of her as her own freckles. The feeding had become almost sacred between them. Regular ritual that was equal parts sustenance, intimacy, and affirmation of the bond they shared. Emery's took what he needed with practiced care, never more than Gwenllian could safely give, always mindful of the trust required. When he pulled back, carefully licking the punctures closed, Gwenllian felt the familiar warmth spreading through the bond, his gratitude, his love, his continued wonder that this was allowed, that she chose this freely. "Better?" she asked. "Always better after you." He drew her close, and they lay together in comfortable silence, the bond humming contentedly between them. "Emery's? Are you happy?" The question emerged quietly. Truly happy. Not just content or making the best of things, but actually happy? He was quiet for long enough that Gwenllian began to worry she'd pushed too far. Then, yes, for the first time in 600 years, I am genuinely, simply happy. His arms tightened around her. "I wake each evening to the sound of Saren's laughter. I spend nights working beside you, building something real and lasting. I have purpose beyond simple survival, connection beyond isolation, love beyond what I thought the curse allowed." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "So yes, my stubborn healer, I am happy. Impossibly, wonderfully happy." Gwenllian's throat tightened with emotion. "Good, you deserve it. We both do. All three of us." He shifted, settling them more comfortably. "Now rest. Tomorrow we show our daughter a waterfall, and pretend to be a normal family on a normal adventure. We are a normal family, just one where the father happens to be an immortal vampire." "Semantics," he said lightly, and Gwenllian heard the smile in his voice. She let sleep claim her, secure in the bond's constant presence, in the knowledge that Emery's watched over them both, in the certainty that they'd built something worth protecting against any darkness. The next day dawned clear and bright, one of autumn's perfect gifts before winter's arrival. They set out as morning aged toward noon, giving Emery's time to prepare for limited sunlight exposure. He wore heavy clothing and a wide-brimmed hat, staying to shadows where possible, but the bond kept him strong enough to tolerate a few hours of filtered sun. The journey was exactly what families were meant to experience. Saren running ahead to investigate interesting rocks or trees, Gwenllian pointing out medicinal herbs growing wild along the path, Emery's providing history about the mountains they traversed. They reached the moonfall as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The waterfall was exactly as the ancient map had promised, a cascade of silver water tumbling over black stone, creating rainbows in its mist. The sound of it drowned thought, leaving only awe. "It's beautiful." Saren breathed, and Emery's lifted her onto his shoulders so she could see better. "Your constellation namesake should appear just there." He pointed to the eastern sky where stars were beginning to emerge. "In about an hour." The moonfall was named because people believed the water came from the moon itself, spilling down to nourish the mountains. "Is that true?" Saren asked. "No, little star. It's just mountain snowmelt finding its path to the valley. But the story is beautiful enough that truth hardly matters." They made camp near the waterfall's base, Emery's building a fire with practiced efficiency, while Gwenllian laid out their supplies. As darkness fell completely, he relaxed into his full nocturnal strength, moving with that fluid grace that marked him as other. Eyes, glowing crimson in firelight. Saren fell asleep early, exhausted by travel and fresh air. Gwenllian and Emery sat together watching the waterfall catch moonlight, turning silver water into liquid starlight. "This is nice," Gwenllian said eventually. being away from responsibility. Just us in the wilderness. It is. Emery's pulled her against his side. Though I confess I'll be glad to return home. The manor has become important to me. It's not just shelter anymore. It's where we are. Home, Gwenllian agreed. It's strange how quickly a place can become that, isn't it? 6 months ago it was ruins. Now it's where we belong. You made it home, you and Saren. He was quiet for a moment then. I've been thinking. About the future. About what happens when Saren grows up and makes her own life. Gwenllian's stomach tightened. Having second thoughts? No, never. He turned to face her. But I want to make sure we're prepared. She'll fall in love someday. Marry, perhaps. Have children. And he struggled with words. I want to be part of that. Want to be the grandfather who tells her children stories, who protects them the way I've protected her. That's assuming she'll want. I know it's not guaranteed. But if she does, if she chooses to keep me in her life as she ages. He met Gwenllian's gaze steadily. I need to know you're comfortable with that. With me remaining active in the family we've built, even after you're gone. The bluntness of it hurt, but Gwenllian appreciated the honesty. Of course I'm comfortable with it. I'd want that for both of you, continued connection, continued love. Just because my mortal lifespan ends doesn't mean the family does. You're certain? Because I could leave. After. Give Saren space to grieve without my presence. Complicating. Don't you dare. Gwenllian's voice firmed. You are her father. That doesn't end with my death. If anything, she'll need you more when I'm gone. Someone who remembers. Who can. Tell her she's not alone. Who can. Her voice broke. Emery's pulled her close, and they clung to each other while the waterfall sang and moonlight blessed their impossible love. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I shouldn't have brought it up. Not here, not now. No, I'm glad you did. We need to talk about these things. Plan for them. Gwenllian pulled back, swiping at tears. I want you to promise me something. Anything. Promise that after I'm gone, you'll let yourself grieve. Really grieve. But then you'll keep living. Keep being part of Saren's life and her children's lives. Keep being the mountain lord who protects these people. She touched his face gently. Don't retreat into isolation again. Promise me. Gwenllian. Promise me, Emrys. I need to know that this life we've built will continue. That you won't let my death destroy everything we've made. He closed his eyes, jaw clenching with emotion. When he spoke, his voice was rough but steady. I promise. I will grieve you with every fiber of my being, but I will not let that grief remake me into the creature I was before you. I will honor your memory by truly living the way you've taught me. Thank you. Gwenllian kissed him softly. Now let's enjoy the rest of tonight. Enjoy this moment. Enjoy being a family under the stars beside a waterfall that might as well be made of moonlight. They held each other while night deepened, and overhead Saren's constellation emerged exactly where Emery's had predicted, brilliant points of light, forming patterns that ancient peoples had used to navigate dark waters. We're navigating dark waters too, Gwenllian murmured, following her own thought. Yes, but we have each other as guides. Emery's tightened his arms around her, and that makes even the darkest waters bearable. They sat together until the fire burned low, then settled into their bedrolls, Saren between them. 3 hearts beating too mortal, one achingly slow, in rhythm that spoke of family and belonging and love that transcended every curse. The waterfall sang them to sleep with ageless music. The moon blessed their rest with silver light. And in that wilderness, far from manor and village and responsibility, an impossible family rested in perfect peace. Tomorrow they would return to real life, to Gwenllian's patience and Saren's lessons and the endless work of maintaining their home. Challenges would come. Winter would test the manor's restoration. Gwenllian's mortality would continue its inexorable march. But tonight brought stars and waterfall song and the knowledge that they were together, choosing each other, building something beautiful from curse and courage and stubborn hope. And that was enough. It would always be enough. The curse remained, dark and eternal. But love stubborn, mortal, transformative love shone brighter still. Epilogue. 5 years later. The manor stood whole against the autumn sky, its towers restored and windows glowing, warm with candlelight. In the great hall, a fire roared against approaching winter, while Gwenllian checked a patient's healing wound, a village boy who'd fallen from a tree and needed stitches. It's healing well, Thomas. Keep it clean and dry for another week, then you can return to climbing. Carefully this time. The boy grinned and ran off, leaving Gwenllian to her notes. At 37, she'd become indispensable to the mountain communities, healer, mediator, the mortal bridge to their immortal protector. "Mama!" Saren's voice, deeper now at 10 years old, but still bright with enthusiasm, echoed from the library. "Can Ellery stay for dinner?" Her parents said yes if you and Daddy agree. "Of course," Gwenllian called back, smiling. Saren had blossomed here, secure and loved, navigating both mortal and immortal worlds with enviable ease. Footsteps on stone announced Emrys's approach. He'd been working on the tower restoration all evening, strength that never flagged making. Short work of tasks that would take mortal men days. "How many for dinner?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "At least 4, possibly 6 if Marge decides to join us." Gwenllian leaned back against him, feeling the bond hum contentedly. 5 years together had only strengthened their connection, deepened their love. "How's the tower?" "Finished. Finally. I thought I'd never get those stones properly aligned." He pressed a kiss to the bond marks on her throat, permanent silver crescents she wore with pride. "You need to feed me. I'm depleted. Always so demanding," Gwenllian teased. But she was already tilting her head, offering access. The feeding was quick, practiced, intimate without being overwhelming. 5 years had taught them exactly how to balance his needs with her comfort, how to make the bond's demands into gifts freely given. "Better?" she asked when he pulled back. "Always better after you." His standard response, delivered with warmth. "I love you, stubborn healer. I love you too, impossible vampire." Laughter from the library, Saren and her friend Ellery, secure in a home that sheltered both mortal and immortal, protected by ancient wards and fiercer love. "We did it," Gwenllian said softly. "Built something real, something lasting. We did." Emrys held her close, and through the bond Gwenllian felt his deep contentment. "Thank you. For insisting I could be more than the curse. For choosing me when running would have been wiser. Thank you for letting me in. For being brave enough to try again." They stood together in their restored manner, listening to their daughter's joy, secure in the life they'd built from ruins and moonlight and stubborn faith that love could transcend even death's curse. The future remained uncertain. Gwenllian would age while Emrys stayed frozen. Eventually, separation would come. But that was tomorrow's grief. Today brought laughter, warmth, family, purpose, love. Today brought life worth living, together. And that was enough. It would always be enough. Outside, the moon rose over mountains that remembered their true lord. In the valley below, villagers rested secure under ancient protection, and in a manor that had been tomb, but was now home, an impossible family gathered for dinner, vampire, healer, and child, choosing each other every day against all reasonable odds. The curse remained, but love, stubborn, mortal, immortal, transformative love, had won,